Today we dive into the lore of Elsweyr, land of whispering sands and river jungles, where the Khajiit's every heartbeat follows the twin moons overhead. We will trace silver-bright moon sugar, the shifting fir stalks, and the eerie void nights, when the skies fell silent. Hidden beneath dune and mangrove alike, a delicate lattice of bells, black glass, and secret pacts has steered empires and destinies for ages. Now, let us begin. The sands remembered their first command in the silent dusk before memory, when twin lanterns rose over the newborn world. Joan, the smaller silver spark, stroked the firmament with tentative light, while Jode, the great white gem, trailed behind, in regal quiet. Their motions braided an invisible tether across the night, and the mass of unformed soil beneath them listened. On Nirn's earliest shores, where oceans boiled faintly from the forging heat of Magnus's sunfall, dunes of pale, crystal dust gathered. Each grain turned until its sharpest face pointed toward the paired moons, and the land that would one day be called Elsweyr bent itself into a gentle crescent, a cradle nestled between Topol's misted bay and the long, cracked spine of Anaquina's sun-bleached ridges. In those dawnless ages, the Elnafey were still shaping their limbs and finding voices. Some stood like sapling trees, their thoughts drifting like pollen on the breeze. Others, touched by wilder impulses, crouched close to the sand, tasting its coarse sweetness and marking the slow pulse of the moons above. From that gathering came a quiet one, Lorcage, cat-shaped spirit, both swift and secret, who carried a question the other gods dared not speak. If Joan and Jode could carve a pattern by moving in harmony, might not mortal life dance the same? Lorcage pricked his own palm with the claw of purpose, letting silver blood seep into the dunes. Where the droplets cooled, they hardened into pearls no larger than the eye of a moth, each flickering with starlight. These seeds would become the first fir stalks, shaped not by static design, but by an ever-changing tune. Magnus, still radiant, from escaping Mundus, watched with wary awe. He saw the moons nudge their lesser brother Massa and sister Secunda, soft names spoken in Aetherius's tongue, and he worried that Lorcage's gift might bind the mortal plane too tightly to tides, beyond measure. Yet Canarthi, wind mother with wings scented of warm sea foam, beat her feathers once and calmed his doubt. "Let the kittens try," she whispered through the gust. "The dance is not ours alone, and the sand remembers every step." So began the Night of the Wandering Births, an era uncounted by scholars because it existed before numerical certainty, when forms drifted in and out of being like lanternfish beneath rolling waves. Some Elnafey children awoke as slender bipeds, their skin faintly scaled and their eyes large with wonder. Others stirred in crouched quadruped stance, whiskers twitching to taste the salt wind. They felt their bodies stretch and shrink with each passing phase of Joan and Jode, as though the moons themselves were kneading their flesh into shapes apt for each celestial measure. The cleverest among them soon learned to read the shift. When both lanterns waxed full, they grew broad of shoulder, tails thick and powerful, fur striped in deep ember hues. When Joan shrank to a mere sliver, but Jode brimmed bright, their limbs thinned, ears lengthened, and eyes turned the pale gold of morning dew. 13 cycles later, the number of distinct forms had reached 16, each a steady note in the lunar chord. The fir stalks lived along the coast first, drawn by the taste of a crystalline sap bleeding from mangrove roots at low tide. It glittered like powdered starlight and carried a sweetness that warmed the belly on cool desert nights. The eldest stalk, frail and wispy, called it Jakhaje's nectar, moon sugar in the simplest tongue. They ground the crystals between polished shells, breathing its scented dust into their throats until song poured out unbidden. These early hymns drifted across topal waters, curling high above the waves like gull cries. The songs did not contain words as scholars understand them. They were elongated vowels tuned to the rhythm of twin heartbeats, one belonging to Nirn, the other to the moons. And it is said the sea calmed when those notes rose, for even the tides recognized kinship in their cadence. Time thickened, and the Elnufe of the sands grew distinct from their cousins who followed Yifra into wooded labyrinths. The woodland folk quickened their roots into rigid history, while the moon-kissed ones cherished fluid memory, believing past and future to be the same ribbon viewed from different angles. When first they saw the forest-bound Mer carve runes into bark and stone, the children of Lorkhaj laughed softly. What need had they of names etched immutable, when each furstock already carried a story written beneath its skin? Yet curiosity tugged them inland all the same. Bands of slender omers, tall, near Merish in stature though furred in copper dust, walked on digitigrade feet toward the grasslands where mighty tusked guar roamed. They sought herbs that might tame the sugar's dizzying trance without dulling its luminous vision. Among them travelled a young Alfic, small as a scholar's house cat, whose quiet gaze measured every breeze. Though the others paid her little heed, she absorbed the world's turning with brilliant clarity, for it is the Alfic who later became lawkeepers, speaking seldom yet remembering all. Southward, humid air rose from marshy flats. There, the lithe Toj and their broader cousins, the Toj rat, crafted reed canoes and drifted through emerald channels under veils of hanging moss. They spoke to fluttering torchbugs in soft chirps, learning which flowers opened only when both moons set. Those blossoms, steeped overnight in silver bowls, brewed into an elixir that cooled fevers brought on by sudden sugar indulgence. The Toj believed each cure repaid a debt owed to Lorkhaj, a quiet act of balance to honor a god who valued daring risk. In this way, medicine and myth fused seamlessly, woven like alternating threads of a single cloth. Inland deserts formed, slowly, wind pushing dunes westward until stone outcrops revealed ancient basalt bones. Under midday's glare, Cathay Rat hunted giant dune harriers, sprinting across burning sand with paws calloused thicker than horn. At dusk, they carried their quarry to communal fires, where Omersrat storytellers recited lineages stretching back through dozens of full lunar pairs. The stories shifted each retelling, not because memory faltered, but because the moons never cast identical shadows twice. Thus, truth itself was a living creature that stretched and arched its spine with each nightfall. Those who listen for absolute precision in such recitations miss the point entirely, for the Khajiit sense of history is mosaic rather than line, shimmering with coloured shards that rearrange under different moonlight. When first Nirn's constellations solidified into known patterns, Alkosh the Time Dragon roared across the heavens to pin them in place. His voice rolled like thunder caught in a brass gorge, unsettling sands across the crescent land. Temples rose on rocky escarpments, built from sandstone blocks whose surfaces were carved with curves reminiscent of swirling dunes. Priests of Vay, Alkosh, broad Suthayrat with manes dyed golden, stood upon those terraces at dawn, reciting hymns that tracked both solar and lunar drift. They taught that while the moons guided life's mutable aspect, the sun's roaring crown guarded the boundary of seasons. To forget either cycle invited disorder, and so even the most sugar-soaked dreamers understood they must still plant grain when Magnus's path signaled spring, else hunger gnaw once the sugar high faded. Yet hunger, too, bore lessons. The earliest winters, brief by northern reckoning, but chilling enough to still the night lizards, pushed tribes from coast and dune into uneasy proximity. Scarcity required accord. Thus, beneath a sky where Joan waxed into teardrop shape and Jode waned to a ragged coin, Suthayrat delegates met Alfic scholars upon the terrace of Moonhenge, a natural amphitheatre of crescent stone, where each dawn painted two luminous arcs upon the ground. Here they composed the first shared oath, known as the quiet accord of pause. No chisel cut the words. Instead, 9 knots of woven tail hair bound around polished moonstone tablets served as their covenant. Each knot represented a promise. 2 for fair trade of sugar and grain, 3 for mutual aid against desert wraiths, and 4 for the right of every fur stock to walk unjudged beneath their chosen phase of the moons. Contemporary imperial chroniclers often lament the lack of physical script, but Khajiiti bards maintain the accord lives in breath and tail flick rather than ink. A living agreement such that breaking it invites cosmic backlash from the Jarkaj, the hidden moon path. Imperial analysis aside, the accord indelibly changed the tribes. Caravans formed, slender Sathe pulling flat sleds laden with sugar crystal north, returning with dried alfika herbs and strip-cured harrier meat. On clear nights, trade camps erupted into low, rhythmic drums, hands tapping folded hides, keeping time with the heartbeats of Joan and Jode. Smoke from simmering curries curled skyward, scented with desert cumin and marsh ginger. In these gatherings, young Cathay listened as aged Omsrat recounted the moment Lorkaj's blood first struck sand, a motif repeated. That courage lies not in defying change, but in bending with it as the dunes bend under wind. Such belief travelled far. When early Aldmer explorers landed along Topol's southern shore, guided by Topol the pilot's fragmented logs, they found nomads who conversed through both purr-soft speech and tail semaphore. The Aldmer, steeped in rigid genealogies, were perplexed. Their quills scratched furiously in leather-bound codices, trying to classify each fur stock as though pinning butterflies within glass frames. They could not fathom a people whose flesh might differ from parent to child, depending on lunar whim. A certain Aldmer scribe, El Nadaira of Alanor, recorded frustration. One dawn, we speak with a narrow-hipped, maned creature. By next morrow, he is broad as a Senshi mount and insists we met his brother. The passage reveals more about Aldmeri preoccupation with static lineage than Khajiiti inconsistency, for the nomads saw no conflict in being both slender and broad across seasons. As they told El Ndira, water fills every pot it's poured into. The pot is not confused. Conflict sparked only when Aldmer sought to mine meteoric glass from desert craters, shards fallen from the sky when Meridia flung a jeweled fortress into Lig's bleeding wound. The tribes considered these fragments sacred, believing they captured the frozen heartbeat of Lorkaj's final sigh. Omisrat envoys approached the Aldmer with polite caution, suggesting trade paths instead of excavation. But Aldmeri pride, sharpened on adamant spires, dismissed feline diplomacy. Under a waning Jode, clashes erupted. Arrows of bone shard and slivers of lunar glass rained upon golden chainmail. It is told that when blood hit the sand, the dunes themselves shifted, swallowing entire skirmish lines in rented whirlpools before settling into unmarked calm. Aldmeri manuscripts blame sudden sinkholes. Khajiiti lore speaks of Lorkaj stirring, displeased by discord over his final gifts. Whatever the cause, the glass craters remained largely untouched afterwards, and a wary detente set in. The Khajiiti learned from this brush with foreign ambition. They must claim guardianship over their night-blessed land lest others misread its silence as permission. Thus blossomed the early notion of Anakina and Palatine, though those names would not be carved into official record until millennia later, representing the northern desert and southern forest coast, respectively. The distinction grew practical, rather than political. Desert tribes refined endurance to outlast dust storms, while coastal clans shaped paddle and sail to navigate labyrinthine river deltas. Yet both answered to the same lunar cadence. Even when distance stretched months, between meetings, each tribe knew precisely which phase the other beheld. The waxing of Joan and Jode was their shared chronometer beyond parchment. Inevitably, debate arose regarding hierarchical stewardship of lunar wisdom. The Firstocks recognized that some among them felt the moon's tug more keenly. In scorching, years when heat shimmered like hammered brass, visions came to certain Sutheirat, fleeting images of a towering figure whose mane braided dozens of tails together. Scholars now identify those earliest visions as foreshadowing the mane, a singular, leader born when Khajiit deems the province requires unified council. At the time, though, the tribes interpreted the dreams as metaphors, and they used them to craft deeper rituals. From dune glass they fashioned twin circlets, one white to represent Jode's milk light, another silver-blue for Joan's cooler glow. These circlets were never worn simultaneously. Rather, they passed from clan to clan, each tribe holding one, while the other lay buried beneath Moonhenge. When both circlets returned to the henge at midsummer, the priests of Alkosh proclaimed the year balanced. It is recorded in scroll fragments, rescued from a partially collapsed Zoetic library near Pa'alatin, that during one such midsummer, lightning split the desert sky despite cloudless calm. The bolt struck both circlets, fusing them into a single helix of twisted metal. Witnesses described an afterimage lingering in the air, the silhouette of a massive Khajiit, fur striped argent and ash, tail braided with countless bells. He, though gender in such visions is fluid, raised a claw to the heavens, and the moons appeared to pause, just for one breath, before resuming their eternal waltz. The priests read this as the moons delivering a sign. A single voice would soon be necessary to guide the clans. Though centuries separated the omen and the first recorded mane, tradition holds that this fusion birthed the concept of a living axis around which all Firstocks might turn. While prophecy matured, the mundane fabric of society thickened. Early settlements formed at oases where subterranean channels, later discovered to be relic riverbeds carved when Nirn fled the Dawn era's turmoil, brought water near the surface. Around these wells grew date palms and bristle-leaf succulents. Omisrat architects designed honeycomb homes from sun-baked brick, the roofs open to night breezes and lattice to cast moon-phase shadows across interior walls. Those shadows served as both decoration and calendar. During full Jode, the lattice aligned so perfectly that the chamber filled with mottled light reminiscent of dappled forest floors. Guests slept in its glow, believing dreams dreamt under Jode's kiss granted glimpses of possible futures. North of the oases, the desert extended toward high mesas. There the Senche and Sencherat, lion-sized quadrupeds more intelligent than an imperial envoy might assume, roamed in small prides. These mighty felines forged alliances with Cathayrat hunters, sharing kills in exchange for protection against bone vultures whose serrated beaks could pierce even Senchi hide. Over generations, the Senche acted as mounts, and their forging bond with upright Firstocks birthed a martial tradition that later imperial legions would come to respect and fear along the sugar roads. Sugar roads themselves began as faint, tracks of crushed crystal underfoot, shining like frost under moonlight. Sutheirat caravanners sprinkled ground sugar across dunes at key crossroads, both as travel offering to the lunar gods and as reflective beacons for nighttime journey. The corridors soon hardened under repeated paw and claw, forming glimmering ribbons visible from sandstone outcroppings leagues away. It is said that on cool nights the roads sang when wind scraped over fine crystal, a faint ringing that guided lost travelers much like a lighthouse hum. Stories abound of wanderers who collapsed in exhaustion, only to wake at dawn lying upon the sugar path's edge, skin cooled by silver dust and throats still humming the road's lullaby. Not all voices under the moon sang benevolent tunes. Somewhere, beyond the dune's western edge, in crags where bedrock splits let black vapors seep from oblivion's skin, cults sprang up who worshipped Namira, the Urdra of darkness immeasurable. These devotees, scorned by mainstream fur stocks, believed. The infinite void beyond starlight offered purity where change could never corrupt. They built no temples, for their heresy demanded silence and hiddenness. Instead, they crept through abandoned sandstone caverns, smothering torches so their whiskers alone sensed shifting currents of stale air. When they surfaced, their eyes reflected no moonlight, an ill omen wherever trade caravans glimpsed such matte gaze. Tales of goods stolen in night and travelers led astray by false sugar glints became whispers. Children repeated around oasis fires. Thus moralism found root. Moon sugar could sweeten song, yet also lure into darkness if ingested with uncontrolled yearning. The desert taught duality in every grain. Still, yearning seldom faded. The Khajiit tribes developed games to train focus and temper sugar's euphoria. One favored pastime involved building intricate sand mandalas at dawn, shapes echoing the lunar lattice. When midday winds destroyed them, the builders sat quietly, acknowledging impermanence. Another ritual saw Cathay youths walking barefoot across heated dunes while balancing bowls of melted sugar syrup upon their heads. Only the calmest stride kept syrup from spilling, and each droplet that fell fed scarab beetles lurking beneath sand. Lessons in balance, humility, and communal nutrition intertwined like Joan, Jode, and Lorcaid's blood. As centuries spilled onward like sugar grains through a cracked hourglass, neighboring lands awoke to their own destinies. From the north came tales of Ysgramor crossing the Sea of Ghosts, while to the east, Velothi exiles trekked into volcanic shadows. These events did not immediately disturb the Khajiit, isolated by desert reach and forest mire. But winds carry rumors faster than caravans. Hunters along the Rimvolds, northeastern highlands where Anaquina's rock meets Cyrodiil's rolling hills, began trading with needies, whose woven leather armor bore painted spirals echoing distant Atmaran craft. Through such exchanges, the Khajiit learned the value of tempered iron and sharpened steel. Blacksmiths near the Rimvolds experimented, folding dune iron with meteoric glass fragments to produce blades that shimmered under moonlight like water ripples. The weapons sang when drawn, a high keening note historians now recognize as vibrational resonance from fused lunar crystal. These moonblades never dulled, and their bearers earned titles as silent crescents, for battles ended swiftly under their curved strikes. Though martial tradition grew, it did not overshadow commerce. Moon sugar remained the crux of Khajiit identity. At first harvest, clans ground fresh sugar into fine powder, blending it with crushed rose hips and dried lotus. They packed the mixture into ceramic jars, sealed with resin, and stamped with family claw marks. These jars traveled far, to Niboneh Valley's humid markets, where imperial alchemists regarded them both as delicacy and dangerous stimulant, to Somerset altars, where sapiarchs used sugar in slow-burning incense to sharpen mind for complex spells, and even to Black Marsh's northern border, where Argonian tribes mixed it with heist sap for visions. Each time sugar crossed a border, a ripple of Khajiit culture followed, carrying songs, tail-flick code, and myth of shifting selves, a subtle diaspora bound not by territory, but by sweet crystalline memory. And amid every trade deal, every armored skirmish, every moonblade unsheathed under crimson dusk, the Furstocks remembered Lorcaid's question: can mortal life dance the same pattern as heavenly bodies and remain free? Their answer unfolded in footpaths and starlit verges, a perpetual yes, though quietly spoken. For each new dawn, as sands cooled to lavender grey and Joan's slim edge dipped beneath horizon, the tribes rose from sleep. They drank warm, spiced goat milk laced with sugar, stretched limbs attuned to Jakaje, and set out again to trace paw prints over ancient dunes. In doing so, they carved the first invisible borders of what scholars would later draw on parchment. Elsweyr, the Elsweyr, where land ever becoming never fixed, defined by motion of moons and heartbeats of those who call shifting sand and lush river their unending song. The crescent land woke each morning beneath a sky still young, yet the settled rhythm of caravans and oases had already etched half-seen paths across its heart. Dawn air tasted of crushed pearl sugar and heated sandstone, and with the first tilt of Magnus toward the horizon, small knots of Suthe-Rat loosened the night's tent ropes. They folded canvas lined with reflective glass thread, habit learned, after generations of watching dune winds sear cloth to ash if left unguarded. The hum of an ever-moving people shaped the very timbre of the desert. It was during one such dawn, neither notable nor forgotten, that the earliest priests of Khajiit gathered on a low ridge overlooking the sugar road and spoke an oath that would refract through centuries. Their pelts glimmered with dew and drifting dust, and each priest tapped the ground twice with the back of a claw, once for Joan, once for Jode, before uttering a phrase held longer than memory. We follow the moons, and thus we lead. Those lineages became the lunar clergy, a loose fellowship of vision keepers who watched the moon lattice for omens of planting, pilgrimage, and peril. At first they held no authority beyond counsel, yet sand does not lie dormant for long, and stories swirling around their nightly vigils soon hardened into reverence. The most gifted among them, often a frail Alfic with ears like night-bloom orchids, or a lean Omes whose whiskers twitched at shifts too subtle for others to detect, learned to draw small sigils in sugar dust. These spiraling marks, visible only in oblique moonlight, traced the hidden inclination of the moons across the year. Traders began to pay in bundles of indigo cloth or coils of river pearls for a priest to walk beside their wagons, chalking fresh sigils at crossroads to ensure safe travel. This itinerant clergy formed the first moonsinger caravans, roving choirs whose haunting low-toned chants calmed skittish Goar and lulled infants to sleep, even as wheels creaked over unforgiving terrain. The moonsingers did not sing words so much as syllables, lingering between vowel and purr. Listeners described hearing the stone beneath their paws resonate. Some claimed dormant seeds sprouted hours after the singers passed, coaxed by vibrations pregnant with lunar promise. Wherever the caravan camps flourished, folk built semicircular fire pits so that flames bent inward, mirroring the crescent arc of the moons. Over seasons, those semicircles closed into full rings, and then into walls, and then into permanent dwellings. Thus, the first towns rooted themselves not by riverbanks alone, but by proximity to a moonsinger's circuit, the way moss finds purchase, where water drips in steady cadence. North of the burgeoning sugar roads, the dune seas stretched cobalt beneath midday glare. Here the air thinned into shimmering distortion, and stones rasped like paper when wind turned them over. Tribes that made this place their crucible, sleek Cathay Rat and broad-shouldered Palmer Rat, learned to read mirage as scripture. They hunted shadow more than beast, gauging distance by the faintest quiver of air. This mastery birthed Anaquina, not yet a kingdom, but an idea, the northern half of the crescent, where survival depended on memory of water, direction, and moonrise. The word rooted in an old dialect meaning favoured by heat that does not kill. An optimistic label given by ancestors determined to remind themselves that hardship was also blessing. In contrast, south of the ridgeline where sand gave way, to fertile deltas and tangled mangrovine, humidity hung heavy enough to bead on whiskers at dusk. Moisture coaxed fruit trees to bow under the weight of gold-green pods, and sugarcane rose taller than an alfic standing upon the shoulders of a senshi cub. Clans here learned to tame the sweetgrass, splitting each stalk with curved iron knives, heated until they sang on anvil stone. The juice ran thick, clarified in cauldrons, and cooled into bricks stacked like incense before ancestral shrines. This region grew into Palatine, the place of waters that taste of sky, so called by Tojay planters, who claimed the rivers invoked distant cloud palaces when caught in certain moonlight. Difference between north and south was not merely climate, but cadence. Anaquina beat like a drum, each dune crest marking a rhythmic heartstop, while Palatine flowed as reed flute, a continuous trill weaving through jungle canopy. Yet both rhythms traced lines on the same score and soon trade. Between them threaded destiny tighter. Tall Cathay Rat led Pack Senche burdened with blue salt and polished moonglass northward, returning with sacks of cane cuttings and barrels of fermented guar milk cheese prized as cooling draught in desert heat. The caravans became veins, and, in their passage, the concept of an Elsweyr wider than clan or oasis seeped into collective intention. Still, intention alone could not quell jealousy. Sugar wealth of Palatine tempted desert chiefs whose herds dwindled after windstorms buried half their wells in a single week. Meanwhile, northern hunters guarded meteor glass craters from southern gem cutters, seeking to craft skooma vials with throats that glowed under starlight. Tension rose like dust devil funnels, twisting across boundary sands. Minor raids flared beneath waxing Joan when shadows allowed stealth. Such skirmishes rarely aimed for conquest. Rather, each was a punctuation mark in an ongoing dialogue where claws debated commerce. Yet each wound stung deeper than the last, and rumour carried tales of a southern warband glimpsed 20 leagues beyond accepted border. Their pelts dyed in imitation of Anaquina's salt stripes, marching under a banner depicting both moons eclipsed. During one such high summer raid, a caravan led by an aged moonsinger named Maziri found itself cornered against a dry river gully. She carried a single drum carved from a sandhog's hollowed shell, its rim inlaid with sigils that spelled out the quiet accord of pause, even now badge of tenuous unity. As arrows hissed above the wagon tops, Maziri lifted her drum and beat a measure that scholars later recorded as the harmonizing pulse of broken sands. Witnesses claimed the opposing parties felt their heartbeats slow, aligning to the cadence until claws lowered with bewildered calm. The skirmish dissolved. Some desert chiefs whispered afterward that the moons themselves had stilled in sympathy, but observant scouts noted the celestial bodies continued their course. Proof that the magic lay not in paused sky but in shared breath. That night around a neutral campfire, delegates from both regions convened to debate cause and cure. Among them sat a young Suthe Rat with fur of twilight mahogany, his tail thick where others tapered narrow. He introduced himself simply as Marge and spoke with a voice as deep as dune rock caverns. While elders disputed tribute and water rights, Marge traced spirals in the sand beside him, lines so smooth they resembled silk laid across stone. When the argument reached crescendo, he lifted his drawing hand and the firelight glinted along, subtle braids woven into his mane, braids threaded with tiny bells, each made by a different clan. The bells jingled faintly, though no wind stirred. Elders fell silent. In that hush, Marge recited a verse older than recorded script. A chant of Lorcadge's last dream, where a single pulse carried many hearts as leaves are carried on one river. He spoke slowly, allowing each syllable to settle like dew on heated stone, and when he finished, a hush deeper than before lingered. It was then the lunar priests recognized a phenomenon foretold since the fused circlet omen, a prophet whose very presence braided disparate fates. The moons had chosen a Maini, yet the concept of Main still lacked formal structure, and debate erupted anew. Who would follow? Would Anaquina cede sovereignty to a southern-born leader if such arose? Would Palatine accept a desert predilection for martial austerity? Mahaj answered none of these with edicts. Instead, he proposed the Dance of Two Moons, a ritual journey during which priests from every clan would walk parallel routes mirroring the nightly arcs of Joan and Jode across the sky, meeting at predetermined nodes where both paths intersected. At each intersection, they would exchange ceremonial sashes dyed in indigo or ochre to mark whether they approached from north or south. Over the course of 49 nights, the pattern of exchanged cloth created a tapestry visible only from heights. Few bothered to climb, until Marge led delegates to a mesa summit at dawn. There, when dawn's first angle cast sufficient shadow, the cloth arrangement revealed the shape of a single spiral encircled by twin crescents, symbolizing multiplicity bound to unity. Word of the ritual spread faster than traders could ride. Clans who had never met now recognized their colors in that vast ground mural. Even skeptics felt a tug when they learned a scrap of fabric dyed by their own hearthfire sat woven beside cloth from a rival oasis. And because the spiral had formed, without any border-crossing lines of color, each clan recognized its pride preserved within the unity, not erased. Thus loyalty shifted from region to symbol, from blood feud to cosmic design. By the time the 40th night of the second dance concluded, caravans needed fewer guards. Sugar shipments reached destinations uncut by raid, and lunar priests began, stitching small spiral tokens of twin crescent twine onto their robes as subtle sign of shared oath. Anaquina, nonetheless, resisted full submission. Northern nomads cherished deep independence forged under merciless sun. Their leaders agreed to attend councils called by the Mane, but insisted those gatherings occur alternately on desert mesas and coastal mangroves, never twice in same territory. Marge accepted and decreed that the Mane must wander, carrying braided tail bells from clan to clan, never possessing fixed throne. This mobility placated northern pride. For Palatine, accustomed to plantations and port halls rooted along river mouths, the idea of a traveling court seemed strange, but poetically apt. They envisioned the Main as living tide, drawing bountiful flood of ideas between their fields and distant sand. To bind this structure, the lunar clergy codified ranks. Senior moon singers became clan beaconers, charged with transmitting lunar omens along sugar roads. Beneath them, path readers wandered individually, recalibrating caravan guides as seasons waxed. On the lowest tier stood tale scribes, often young Alphic scribblers who recorded every variation in moonshadow to preserve nuance. And above all, floated the Main, at once exalted and humble, for every Khajiit owned a single tale, but the Mane braided thousands. When a Main walked, attendants parted crowds not because of overt authority, but because loose bells whispered lineage from every corner of the crescent. During the first pilgrimage south, a rare celestial alignment occurred. Massa and Secunda, Joan, and Jode in older tongue, both reached zenith at precisely dusk, casting two overlapping circles upon the water of the Tenmar estuary. Fisherfolk claimed to see a third shimmer between them, ephemeral as breath on glass. Priests later named this the 13th moon, phantom sign that Jakarje approved the new covenant. The illusion lasted mere minutes, yet songs composed to honor it endured centuries, each verse referencing the silver step that appears when hearts align. Following that omen, Palatine planters erected lattice-work pavilions along every major canal, open on 8 sides so river breeze cooled. Fermenting sugar, they painted outer posts with swirling calligraphy, acknowledging northern clans by name. In turn, desert smiths forged copper plaques etched with water motifs, gifting them to plantation estates to hang above cane presses. The cultural exchange fused aesthetic. Desert stone carving began favoring softer curves reminiscent of mangrove trunks, whereas coastal pottery incorporated geometric sunburst glazes inspired by dune horizons. Travelers could increasingly trace their route by style rather than landmark, yet unity bred new complexity. As sugar export grew, so did skooma refinement, a darker distillate steeped with torchbug thoraxes and powdered nernroot. Skooma dens sprang first along border towns where caravans required rest, then in city outskirts where trade coin pooled. The clergy debated moral stance. Many argued that moon sugar carried dream visions sanctioned by Lorkhaj, while skooma severed mind from moon's guiding cadence, leading souls into Namira's endless void. Others contended that what freed one mind might enslave another, and that moral decree could not replace individual Jar Kajai. The Mane chose silence, but introduced yearly gatherings called vigil fasts, where devotees abstained from all sugar to prove rule over desire. Participation remained voluntary, yet peer regard quickly elevated the fast from optional to honorable. While internal reforms unfolded, outside powers stirred. In the west, Yokudan refugees landed on Hammerfell's beaches. To the east, rising Velothi city-states experimented with tonal architecture. Neither event yet reached the heart of Elsweyr, but scouts along border ridges recorded flickers of foreign banners on distant nights. Anticipating future entanglements, the Moonsinger caravans adapted routes, braiding twin loops nearer to Cyrodiilic valleys, so word of distant policy gusted across sugar roads long before armies could march. Tale scribes coded new semaphore using lantern color combinations: amber for threat, violet for plague, and indigo for invitation, to flash between watchposts perched atop both desert spires and estuary watch trees. One notable lantern code traveled south bearing indigo bloom, invitation to the first Congress of Crescent Shadows, a summit conceived by Marge to formalize conflict resolution. Delegates arrived on river barges and century-drawn sledges, encamping under canopies dyed half golden, half sea green, reflecting north and south. For 3 nights, they debated finer points of sugar tariff, crater glass guardianship, and the right to water drawn from shared aquifers. Each dawn, unresolved categories were inscribed on parchment ribbons and tossed into ceremonial braziers lined with star shells. The smoke's color, shifting between pale rose and sable, signaled to waiting observers where the compromise neared. On the 4th dawn, smoke rose vivid lavender, hue of twilight between twin moons, and an accord emerged. Trade tariffs would scale with lunar phase, taxes light during waxing Joan to encourage movement, higher during waning Jode when caravans slowed, thus equalizing prosperity across seasons. Guardianship of crater glass came under Triclan oversight, employing both desert and coastal wardens, with neutral Alphic archivists cataloguing each shard. Water rights followed ancient precedents. The tribe nearest an aquifer would own stewardship, but must host annual blessing, where all clans bathed tailtips, symbolically sharing resource. These resolutions seem quaint to modern strategists accustomed to ledger and garrison. Yet for Khajiiti society, they crystallized an ethos. Issues settle when they reflect celestial rhythm. If one tried to fix any policy in granite like Aldmeri law, it would fracture beneath shifting sand, but align it to the push and pull of moons, and the policy flexed into longevity. Even imperial legates later admitted frustration at negotiating treaties within such fluid framework, where tax could change simply because Secunda blushed into Crescent. Nevertheless, adaptability proved fortress stronger than stone. In the generations following the Congress, twin cities emerged as luminous nodes on an expanding trade constellation. To the north rose Naquinal, city of the moonlit vellum, perched where desert plateau met high valley. Scribes here mixed powdered glass into ink, producing manuscripts that shimmered under moonrise and remained invisible at noon, preserving secrecy from foreign spies ill-adapted to nocturnal reading. Southward gleamed Pa'alatin, harbour of sugar and silence, built upon piers radiating from a mangrove-ringed island. Sailcloth woven of cane fibre displayed subtle patterns only visible in dawn haze, guiding returning fishermen through labyrinthine delta passes. Naquin Al and Pa'alatin produced rival poet guilds, each claiming lineage from original moon singers. Friendly contests of verse evolved into elaborate performances where singers wove entire histories, while dancers traced maps on stage floor using sugar crystal. Audiences would taste pinches of scattered crystal to decode hidden meaning by flavor. Alone, a salted shard might signify desert battle, a syrup-infused one peace along rivers. Although rivalry mostly expressed through art, a few seasons tipped toward tension when Nay Quinal's dune smiths perfected a blade alloy rumored to slice cane stalks without crushing fibers, doubling juice yield. Plantation overseers in Palatine sent spies to obtain the technique, and subsequent scandal threatened to unlace the tapestry Maharj had woven. The main, now older, main bells tarnished but resonant, embarked on a journey with no guards, carrying one blade of the contested alloy and one barrel of cane bricks. He halted mid-route at a plateau where desert meets marsh, a place known simply as Sepcleft. Under full twin moons, he struck the barrel once with the blade. The barrel split clean, yet its cane bricks remained unsullied. Then he shattered the blade against a stone. Gathering shards, he mixed them into sugar until the crystals sparkled like starlight. At dawn, he offered handfuls of the glowing sugar to both spy and smith present. "See," he murmured, "knowledge feeds sweeter when shared." So goes the anecdote recorded by tale scribes, though no neutral chronicle can confirm its full veracity. Regardless, after Sepcleft disputes seldom threatened violence. Maharj died during a lunar eclipse that tinted both moons the color of cooled embers. His body was not entombed. Instead, by tradition, hair braids from every clan were unfastened from his tail and returned to original owners. Those braids are said to still exist, sealed in amber jars stored across dozens of shrines. Though modern, provenance remains suspect. The position of Mane passed according to prophecy, not blood. Many expected the next to rise quickly, yet moons withheld the sign. Years stretched, 2 decades then 3. In that interregnum, clan beaconers grew in prominence, guiding policy through council consensus. Some historians argue this period cemented republican resilience within Khajiiti governance. Even without singular main, decisions flowed, albeit slower, through network of priests and caravan medallions. During the waiting years, settlement density rose. Desert artisans fused meteoric glass with desert lime to create translucent tiles, which they set into domed rooftops. By day, sun refracted through colored panes, painting interior walls with swirling lunar patterns. By night, starlight alone powered faint luminescence, allowing scholars to read without torch smoke. In Palatine, water architects harnessed tide, pulleys to lift irrigation canals along terraced cane fields. The mechanism relied on paired counterweights timed to moon-driven tides, making farms throb like living organs at rhythm of cosmic bodies. Culture intertwined deeper. Litter carriers from Anaquina learned Palatine lullabies to calm restless Senche kits. Southern healers adopted desert spineweed paste to treat foot rot in marshy soil. Linguistic exchange thrived. Lexical scholars traced roots of words like Jazir, unseen yet present, to blended dialects. Overlapping festivals emerged. The Night of Green Sugar, where cane sap is frozen in desert wind to craft tri-flavored ices. The Day of Still Sand, when southern planters fast midday to honor drought-bound cousins. The Shared Sky Vigil, when both regions extinguish lamps simultaneously to watch meteor showers pass. While internal affairs flourished, external observers took note. Early Alessian missionaries crossed Valenwood border, seeking to spread the one light doctrine. They found Khajiiti paradox confounding, a people who revered change yet held unbroken line to cosmic order. Monsters of inconsistency, Alessians called them, incapable of proper piety. Their attempts to convert caravans met polite refusal. Khajiit seldom react with fervor to dogma that ignores moonrise nuance. Nevertheless, they left behind scroll fragments mispronouncing Jahajay as Jagkai. These fragments, preserved in imperial libraries, often confuse later scholars who rely solely on Cyrillic sources. Another border power, the nascent Colovian estates, dispatched traders bearing bronze trinkets. They valued sugar but feared skooma, describing its hallucinations as spiders of glass crawling behind the eye. Their chroniclers recount one incident where a Colovian captain drank diluted skooma at a Palatine feast and claimed to meet Alkosh coiling around the lighthouse star. Whether vision or drink, the story spread, fueling legends that Khajiit trafficked with time itself. Such myths quietly bolstered Khajiiti prestige, granting diplomatic leverage. When one can bend chronology and rumor, negotiation partners pause before pressing advantage. At last, signs of new Maine appeared, though subtle. Tale scribes recorded simultaneous stillbirths across distant clans, coinciding with the brief re-emergence of the phantom 13th moon reflected in an oasis pool. Elders interpreted this not as tragedy, but as cosmic exchange. Life withheld from many, so that singular life may carry greater weight. Months later, a child called Ridthar Ridata was born under a sky where Joan, Jode, and a veil of shooting stars formed near-perfect equilateral pattern. Ridthar's fur bore stripes that shimmered silver at dusk, and his pupils reflected lattice lines invisible to others. Alphic nurses noted he seldom mewled. Instead, he listened, head tilted as though catching a distant drumbeat. Ridthar's upbringing blended desert rigors and coastal grace. He spent first 10 years walking sugar roads, learning each caravan's cadence, mastering both dune navigation and river poling. By 15, he debated eldest priests on orbit calculation. At 20, he vanished for a year. Some say he journeyed to Kanathi's roost and conversed with wind itself. Upon return, he outlined the Riddlethar Epiphany, a codex uniting metaphysical insights of lunar faith with pragmatic law. Its core premise held that spiritual harmony emerges when physical, mental, and temporal paths interlock like claws gripping prey. Though lofty, Ridthar anchored doctrine through simple practice. He restructured festival calendar so major rites alternated between northern and southern venues, ensuring pilgrimage remained perpetual. He also mandated that sugar tariffs translate directly into infrastructure. One braid length of sugar weight collected equaled one sandstone block for desert stepwells, or one mangrove log for coastal wharfs. Implementation required bureaucracy. Clan beaconers transformed into temple districts, each led by bright moons, a duo of priests mirroring twin lunar bodies, chosen specifically from opposite regions, ensuring decisions always mediated perspective. Bright moons wore half masks, one carved of desert basalt, the other of river pearl. When ruling, they sat beneath parted canopy, so night sky visible. Any decree must be spoken while at least one moon stood above horizon, else postponed. This custom frustrated foreign envoys, who scheduled meetings by sun rather than moon, yet it reinforced internal cohesion. Ridthar's crowning moment came during the Festival of Deleted Shadows, a once-in-a-generation event when Arcus Cloud cover rendered sky starless even at midnight, leaving only moons to pierce darkness. In that gloom, he stood atop the spiral platform of Torval, a new city rising where Paalatine's wharfs converged, and recited the litany of Moth's first molt, each verse an allegory of discarding old skin to grow. As he spoke, lantern bearers extinguished flames one by one until only moonlight shone, illuminating glyphs set into platform surface. Observers gasped as glyphs portrayed Anaquina and Palatine swirling together, two rivers merging into infinite knot. Scholars writing later insisted subtle torches must have hidden behind columns, but Khajiiti present swear no flame remained. Whatever trick or truth, the spectacle sealed popular acceptance of the Maine's authority. Under Ridthar, construction flourished. The Moon Silk Bridge spanned the Xylo River, its cables woven from spider silk farms crossbred with dune wasps, shimmering under dusk. Desert engineers carved the Sun Shadow Canal, channeling seasonal floods from Rimwald's foothills into basin fields, converting scrubland to grain terraces. Trade outposts along Colovian frontier integrated Khajiit tail semaphore into watchtower, signals, letting messages traverse border twice as fast as imperial courier pigeons. Meanwhile, pathreaders relocated crater glass reserves into sanctums protected by geometric wards derived from Ridlethar diagrams, discouraging smuggling. Yet Ridthar's reign was not utopian. Increased sugar wealth amplified skooma export, drawing crime syndicates. The Shadow Scales, Argonian assassins beholden to Black Marsh heist dreams, accepted contracts to eliminate certain bright moons rumoured corrupt. This led to covert conflicts fought in silent alleyways of Nequinal and along fog-swathed canals of Torval. Ridthar responded by founding the Whisperclaw Accord, a network of silent sentinels trained to sense breath across closed rooms. Their symbol, a crescent claw tipping inward, appeared carved on threshold lintels where skooma dens closed overnight. Scholars debate whether the Accord made war against crime or simply absorbed it within regulated ritual. Either way, violence waned without external intervention. Near end of Ridthar's life, Hannibal of Anvil, a Colovian sea captain turned scholar, visited Elsweyr, publishing travelogue praising Sugar Road's night navigation and criticizing imperial roads for lacking comparable elegance. His writings circulated in Cyrodiil, sparking trend of decorating banquet halls with crescent mosaics. Though cultural appropriation, it signaled rising influence. Some imperial senators proposed annexation through trade treaties. Others warned the Crescent Land's fluid governance would swallow any static imperial code. No invasion ensued, but diplomatic entanglement deepened, sowing seeds for eras to come when Rayman legions and later Tiber's cohorts would march. Ridthar died quietly aboard a river barge drifting between Torval and the marshy town of Helkarn. Witnesses say twin moons reflected perfectly upon still water, forming full circles uninterrupted by ripple. Tale scribes recorded his final words as simple: "Dance without fear, claws find purchase when step follows moon." His body was slid into river embraced by lotus blooms. Bells were distributed not to clans, but to ordinary caravanners, ensuring memory rang along every road rather than gathering dust in shrine vaults. Thus closed a chapter of consolidation, where Elsweyr, still called by some scholars the Crescent, Confederacy, wove its identity through wandering priests, braided bells, and laws measured by lunar sweep instead of solar decree. The deserts of Anakyna and jungles of Palatine remained distinct, yet when twin lanterns climbed nightly arc, both lands tilted faces towards same silver light, and by that shared glow, a people once scattered among dunes and mangroves learned to hold difference as mirror rather than blade, to speak in songs that shaped stone, and to measure time not by conquest, but by the soft footfall of moons across an ever-open sky. The river that carried Ridtharidatta's bier wound south through delta channels, and on either bank the mourners traced their own reflections in water until the current swallowed every ripple. When the lotus blooms drifted apart, neither Anakyna's dunes nor Palatine's paddies felt the same hush. The silence was different in each place, like two strings tuned to the same key yet vibrating at separate hums. It was from that gentle divergence that Nequin-Al and Palatine first learned how closely unity can nest against rivalry. Decades had passed since Ridthar's passing, and the braided bell network he left behind still rang each dusk. Yet, the bells had begun to sound distinct motifs. Desert throats favored a 3-beat cadence, while coastal throats leaned into flowing 5-note sighs. At first, such nuance merely colored nightly prayers, but merchants, ever attentive to rhythm, soon aligned their contracts to the beat they found most familiar. In markets where the drums struck 3, cane bricks sold dearer, where the sigh stretched to 5. Crater glass, fetched higher price. What began as aesthetic preference sharpened slowly into material advantage. In Nquinal, the high valley city whose sandstone libraries glimmered under moon ink, scribe guilds convened to codify export tariffs that favored caravan goods over river freight. They argued, with geometric logic etched in silver dust, that the desert road demanded greater upkeep. Every mile of sugar-crusted track required sweepers to clear drifted sand. Every night post a sentinel to scare bone vultures from pacts. If coastal traders, gliding downstream on water already sculpted by Magnus and Massa alike, paid the same duty, what incentive remained for dune merchants to brave the furnace wind? The decree adopted without dissent inside Nquinal's Crescent Council Hall, yet whispers carried down the sugar line quicker than any courier. Pa'alatin, pronounced Pa'ahlatin by local tongue, rose upon mangrove pilings over brackish water. There, the cane lords met beneath woven palm domes painted with swirling teal and saffron script. They read Nquinal's tariffs as hostile first chess move and responded with policy as fluid as their river's braid. Coastal bargemen would henceforth levy docking fees on any desert caravans seeking to load goods onto ocean vessels. Such caravans required wharf space, water barrels, and night watch torches, argued Palatin speaker. Let them pay so the tide might balance the dune. The edict drifted upriver on moist air, stopping first at Torval's marble quays, where bright moons struggled to mediate, then riding heat columns over the Tenmar forest until it landed in Nquinal like a clap of dry thunder. Neither side named the other enemy, yet the sugar flow slowed, and that was conflict enough. Caravanners waited 2, then 3 extra nights for customs seals, once stamped in moments. Reed rafts lingered outside Pa'alatin's booms, while harbour scribes inspected manifests by lantern, each tilt of the lamp an unspoken admonition. In dune campfires, traders muttered that marsh folk had grown soft on easy harvest. In cane clearings, planters sang joking verse that desert kin overvalued dust. The jokes reached children, then epics, then border skirmish songs where dancers mimed, claw swipes beneath flickering torch, and when stories crossed threshold into performance, they seldom turned back. Around this time, a slender Suthe-rat named Drozir, a name meaning quiet comet, walked both roads. He carried no goods but a single polished staff inlaid with pearl at one end and meteor glass at the other. His purpose, so he told sentries, was to finish the Dance of Two Moons begun generations earlier, though no official clergy commissioned him. Drozir stepped into Nquinal's archive atrium at dusk and asked permission to read ledger of tariff decrees. The overseer, amused by his dusty cloak, granted access. All night Drozir copied figures on parchment, not altering a stroke. At dawn he crossed the valley and started down the salt-white road toward Torval. Weeks later, he appeared in Pa'alatin's Cane Guild Hall, requested their docking ordinances, and copied them too. When coastal scribes asked why, he smiled. To understand a knot, one must finger both strands. Neither council heeded the wanderer, but tales of his mirrored staff spread. Some believed pearl and glass bound by ridged iron represented Jode and Joan. Others claimed the rod concealed, locking blades. Yet Drozir never raised it in anger. He merely walked, listened, and wrote. His notebooks, preserved in modern Basok halls, record an unsettling symmetry. For each tariff in the north lay an equal levy in the south, each complaint mirrored by counterpart across the crescent. Those ledgers show a land arguing with its own reflection, like twin moons poised above opposite horizons. While internal rivalries brewed, the west stirred with louder thunder. Down the Gold Coast, early Alessian missionaries had already failed to sway Khajiiti caravans. Now, under potentate Abbot Cecidius of Glenumbria, they returned not as quiet proselytes, but as auditors of heresy. The Alessian order, wielding doctrine, hot as smelted brass, declared the biosphere of Nirn one moral battlefield. Their arm-sheathed monks marched south, carrying scrolls of equal balance, intent on cleansing what they deemed moon-addled superstition. They crossed the border near Arenthia, converting pockets of Colovian settlers before stepping onto lands the sugar roads claimed. Alessian doctrine condemned Jakaje's fluid morphologies, equating shape-shifting with Daedric corruption. The Order's chronicles named the Khajiit patchwork people of the lunar wound, a phrase still found burned into temple ruins north of the 10-mile walk. Alessian envoys first sought Ne Kinal, believing desert folk hardened enough to respect strict monastic law. They presented gifts, brass astrolabes etched with the 8 divines, flatbread blessed under single sun noon, and a decree promising reduced import tariff on Colovian steel if the city accepted Alessian civic codes. Nequinal's council invited the monks to share tea of dried prickly pear. Mid-meal, when a monk extolled virtue of fixed form, a Senchi servant padded forward, eyes reflecting the tea's sheen, and asked softly which form the monk would choose under a sky that never stopped. Changing, the priest answered, the one ordained. The Senche flicked tail once, whispered, "So be it," and left. That night, desert winds scoured the caravansary where the monks slept, tearing canvas and flinging coals across their pages. In the morning, they found half their scrolls charred, star patterns blown away like ash. Whether sabotage or sandstorm remains debated, but the message felt pointed. Denied easy inroad, Alessian clergy turned south. Pa'alatin welcomed them politely, for Cain lords measured profit in every foreign curiosity. They opened warehouses, showed the monks sugar distilleries, sold them moon-glass lanterns whose inner filaments glowed azure. The visitors marveled, then recoiled upon realizing the lantern dye came from ground torchbug wings, which their doctrine deemed impure. A week later, Alessian proclamations forbade trade in insect blood luxuries. Port officials shrugged. The lords simply raised price of lanterns for black market sailors. Commerce thrives on prohibition like vines cling to stone. And soon, Pa'alatin's estuaries teemed with skiffs smuggling glimmer lanterns up the Niben. The Alessian mission thus birthed the very shadow economy it sought to erase. Frustration hardened to edict. The Order's military arm, the Marrow-Tongue Legion, a cadre of pikes augmented by chanting battle monks, received sanction to uproot lunar heresy by force if persuasion failed. They marched east from Riverhold under banners of Single Central, Sundisk. Word preceded them, for path readers along ridge towers saw the dust plume days ahead. And here, Nequin Al and Pa'alatin learned what rivalry truly measured against external peril. Desert Council lit signal pyres in intervals of 9 heartbeats. Coastal wharfs responded with violet lanterns. In less than 3 nights, a congress met at Sepcleft Plateau again. No Manet walked among them. The moons still withheld that blessing. But the bright moons of 3 temple districts arrived together. Masks of basalt and pearl aligned. They spoke little. Instead, they traced the old spiral pattern in sugar across the plateau, reminding delegates of Ridthar's merged path. The message clear: repulse the outsiders first, resume squabble later. Delegates signed a compact by dipping claws into shared ink bowl. The parchment remains in Torval archive, each signature a looping curl, echoing dune crest or river eddy. When Marrow-Tongue vanguard advanced through Tenmar Pass, they found the path littered with broken moon glass, shards reflecting midday glare like water pools. Horses balked, archers glimpsed shapes darting among thorned juniper. Alphic scouts, eyes bright, tails flicking like twigs in fire. Night fell, and drums from unseen slopes syncopated with insect chorus, confusing the legion's step. By dawn, desert skirmishers struck first. Cathay Rat's sabres curved from crater alloy, sliced rope bridges after luring monks onto them. Tojay Rat marsh archers fired reed shafts tipped with sugar resin that ignited upon impact, setting monk robes ablaze. Alessian commanders underestimated how well River and Dune had studied each other's tactics. Palatine sappers flooded narrow canyon routes, forcing legion formations onto high ground, where Nequin Al's mounted Senche swept them down. Within 3 days, the Marotongues retreated to Arenthia, half strength, their hymns choked by sand in lungs. Alessian chronicles call Tenmar Pass Valley of the False Moons thereafter, declaring the Khajiit protected by illusion sorcery. Khajiiti bards counter that cunning needs no sorcery when land listens. Victory kindled pride but rekindled rivalry too. Alliances born in danger risk fading when peace returns. As caravans resumed, desert customs officers once again eyed River, goods with suspicion, and wharf scribes inspected crates from dunes more stringently than before. It was into this simmering restlessness that a new leader emerged. Not Manet, but Queen. Her name was Shajara, sand scribe of clear water. Half desert born, half river raised, she embodied both accents in her speech, clipped desert consonants against flowing coastal vowels. Shajara claimed descent from the line of Nequin Al's earliest scribe lords, yet she spent childhood seasons mapping Paalatine's canal mazes. At 24, she returned north and petitioned Nequin Al's council to grant her a charter for trans-provincial guard. The council scoffed. She left and gathered a band of 50 caravan guards, outfitting them with half moon blades, half river harpoons. They called themselves the Sand Ripple Cohort, a paradox cresting in a single stroke. The cohort's first act was neither raid nor escort, but rebuilding an abandoned stepwell near city of Dune. Using coastal pulley design, they raised roof beams that channeled rare rainfall into vast cisterns. Desert folk watched as water level rose, and Shajara declared the well neutral sanctuary for any merchant taxed unfairly by either council. Her neutrality angered both factions, yet enticed droves of traders across borderlands. Within a summer, the stepwell transformed into bustling exchange square, nicknamed the Gate of Still Light, because its water reflected Joan and Jode with uncanny clarity. Levies collected at the gate-funded escort rosters who patrolled Sugar Road stretches previously plagued by bandits. Rival councils attempted to claim shares, but Shajara presented documents stamped by both Bright Moon offices, which she obtained. Through deft timing, having submitted forms during their joint fast when scribes minded spiritual vigil more than fine print. Power gravitates towards stability. In 2 decades, the Sand Ripple cohort became fulcrum for economic flow. Shajara, now styled Queen of the Gate, hosted emissaries from both cities for tea beneath latticed awnings. She wore no crown, only a single braid decorated with a pearl at tip and a shard of glass at root. Observers saw in her coiffure the reconciliation of twin economies. Whisper networks soon speculated. Perhaps the Mene sign remained absent because Lorcaj's blood waited for mortal hand to bind the knot this time. Whether by prophecy or human, cat agency, momentum built toward unification, yet unity proved fragile under gaze of larger empires. North, across Vallis Peaks, Riemann Cyrodiil's banners unfurled, a dragon-profiled serpent swallowing pearl disk. Riemann's legions, forged in the crucible of Akaviri invasion, now looked south, eager to secure borders and rich trade. They marched first to Valenwood, establishing Colovian estates of West Weald. Next, they turned eye toward Elsweyr's sugar. Legatus Frontovanus proposed a treaty, guarantee sugar shipments at fixed imperial price in exchange for legion outposts, protecting roads. Nequin Al's scribes considered, Palatine's cane lords hesitated. Shajara invited the legatus to the Gate of Still Light, offering reflection pool to mirror his ambition. Under full moons they walked colonnades, discussing tariffs. Witnesses note Shajara's tail remained motionless the entire audience, a feat signifying extreme restraint, as Varnus spoke of integrating these lands into the greater harmony of empire. she promised to consult councils. While negotiations brewed, an arcane scholar in Torval named Kozar unearthed fragments of ancient Dereni star charts mapping potential lunar alignments. Kozar calculated that within 12 winters, both moons would enter rare twin umbra, casting Elsweyr into brief darkness midday. Such omen, he claimed, historically preceded major shifts in Khajiiti governance. News reached Shajara Do, who convened an unprecedented assembly of councillors, cane lords, and caravan captains at Sep Cleft. There, beneath waning Jode, she proposed the Compact of Two Moons, dissolving Nequinal and Pa'alatine's customs, independence, and merging them under a central administration, the Crescent Consulate. Tariffs would standardize by lunar phase across entire province. Watch duties shared. Sugar and glass taxed by identical weight measures. In return, each former capital would host alternating sittings of legislative conclave, preserving regional. Voice debate lasted 9 nights. On the 10th, Legatus Varnus's envoys arrived bearing fresh draft treaty offering imperial stewardship. The timing, perhaps coincidence, perhaps spycraft, galvanized waverers. Councils signed compact parchment, claw ink overlapping where hesitation trembled. The same night, Shajara Do set her braid bells ringing up and down Sugar Road, signaling to all caravans that they now travelled within one province, Elsweyr. The word, older than any council yet never before enshrined in law, meant Elsweyr, place that is everywhere among moons. Its legal inscription transformed metaphor into political identity. Imperial envoys, arriving days later, faced united tariff board, where previously 2 suspicious desks stood. The board rejected fixed-price sugar deals, insisting on variable, rate-keyed to lunar calendar. Legatus Varnus recognized the stone had set. Imperial dogma prized cohesive provinces over fractious ones. It would be simpler to negotiate later. Unification invited administrative challenges. The Crescent Consulate required census to apportion duties. Yet counting Khajiit defies static ledger, for one child born under new moons may grow into form unrecognized by census taker a decade hence. Queen Shajara Do introduced dual-phase registry. Each citizen recorded twice, once by birth firstock and once by current phase. Registry clerks travelled with pairs of tame moths, one white, one blue, released at dusk above homesteads. Whichever moth circled residents' head first denoted phase for that season. The method seems quaint to modern statisticians, but its symbolism, allowing self-declared identity mediated by natural sign, avoided cultural dissonance. Legion accountants found the books baffling. Khajiiti tax collectors found them perfect. For 8 peaceful years, sugar roads brightened. Moonglass lantern exports quadrupled. Canals thrummed with barge traffic heavier than any season prior. Scholars in Nequin Al exchanged dissertations with Pa'alatine botanists on cross-grafting. Desert date palm to marsh fig, producing fruit tolerant to brackish soils. Joint guardhouses rose along Rimwald's passes, garrisoned by mixed patrols whose signet entangled dune sunburst and river swirl. Children learned songs teaching them to draw both city crests as a single continuous line without lifting claw from sand, a mnemonic for unity. Peace drew Raymond's attention again, this time through commerce. He extended a new proposal. Empire would build stone-paved roads, imperial highways, through Elsweyr, promising faster trade and legion protection. The consulate debated, wary of garrisons, but tempted by infrastructure. Shajara Do, approaching twilight of rain, weighed possibilities. She convened a symposium at the Gate of Still Light, inviting Kozar the scholar and Drosier the quiet. Comet, now venerable yet still roaming. Kozar argued roads would anchor province physically, but risked locking its cultural fluidity within imperial mile markers. Drosier posed a riddle. What road serves the moon, which travels not on Earth? His point, Mobility lay within sky. Earthbound constructs might chain rather than free. Ultimately, Consulate accepted limited roadwork, stone bridges over floodplains, improved passes, but refused permanent Legion forts. Instead, they allowed rotating Imperial trade marshals escorted by Khajiit path guards. Riemann accepted, for his empire valued profit nearly as much as conquest. Imperial masons toiled beside Khajiit stone layers, mixing volcanic mortar with powdered sugar resin to resist desert heat. The resulting causeways, glimmering faintly at night, became known as silver strides. Travelers claimed the stones sang when trod at certain moon angles, echoing original sugar roads. During this construction, the twin umbra foretold by Khazar arrived. Midday sky dimmed. Joan and Jode both slid into Nirn's shadow, turning the land indigo. Animals stilled. In Torval, fish leapt from water, thrashing as though to flee darkness. At Gate of Still Light, Reflection Pool vanished to Black Mirror, and Shajara Doe's own image blurred. She, sensing omen, declared that neither Queen nor Council should hold power under such hush. Only Amain could steward hearts into next era. That night, she unbraided her dual bell, severed pearl from glass, and placed each into separate caskets, one to be buried beneath dune north of Naquin Al, one beneath deepest mangrove root south of Pa'alatin, inviting future generations to seek them as tokens of balance. Shajarado stepped from dais, became again simply traveller, disappearing into Tenmar mists. Some say she became Alfiq Wanderer, small yet wise. Others insist she ascended with moons. Chroniclers mark no confirmed site. Without monarch, the consulate relied on bright moons to maintain civic tide until Maine appeared. 2 decades stretched, still no divine sign. Meanwhile, imperial governors shifted tone. With Raymond's death, potentate Versidue Shea assumed regency. The Akaviri potentate prized subtle control. He issued edict establishing guild charters across Empire, including Elsweyr. Fighters Guild chapters opened in Naquinal, weaving imperial martial discipline into local guard service. Mages Guild halls appeared in Torval, introducing scholarly lexicons of Aliad roots and star calculus. Many Khajiit welcomed the knowledge exchange. Others saw creeping tether. Skooma production spiked as guild alchemists imported new reflux, stills, though they claimed to refine health elixirs. Local crime rings quickly adapted equipment. This moral divergence echoed earlier discourse on sugar and skooma, now magnified under imperial lens. Within this ferment rose 2 leaders. Mirror images again. Juzar Da of Naquin Al, warlord scribe who commanded silent crescent blades, and Rasavado of Pa'alatin, Cain magnate turned philanthropist. Each garnered followings among those who feared imperial oversight. Yet where Juzar brandished call for martial independence, training Sencha cavalry, and forging spearheads etched with crescent scars, Rasava favored economic leverage, encouraging plantations to withhold sugar shipments unless tariffs favored local cooperatives over guild monopolies. Letters passed between them at first cordial, then laced with barbs. A minor incident, Fighters Guild mercenaries escorting Juzar's grain convoy claimed extra pay at Pa'alatin docks, ignited tempers. Dock workers refused unloading. Cavalry drew blades. 2 were cut down before Bright Moon arbiters separated parties. Versidue Shea seized pretext. Claiming need to protect imperial citizens, he dispatched the 8th Legion under General Balio Olo. They marched swift on silver strides, setting temporary camps every 30 miles. Crescent Consulate, alarmed yet leaderless in absence of Maine, convened emergency council. Some advocated surrender of local tariff autonomy to avoid war. Juzar Dar urged open resistance. Rasavado suggested sugar embargo. Debates gridlocked until an omen shattered deadlock. Across sky streaked triple meteor shower, each shard burning distinct hue, pearl white, glass blue, and deep tawny. Path readers interpreted event as birth sign. The next morning, rumor emerged of a child born simultaneously in a remote savannah shrine, his tail already braided into single thick rope. Consulate dispatched riders, Legion scouts shadowed them. They found the shrine silent save wind chimes carved from dune reeds. Within, a litter of centaur cubs circled a cradle fashioned of river lilies. The child, a small Cathay with fur pattern, spiraling around chest like doubled crescent, slept untroubled. His mother, a wandering herbalist from both bloodlines, recounted dream where Joan and Jode pressed together, becoming doorway through which Guardian entered Nirn. Clergy confirmed. Symbols. The braid uncut since womb. A faint bell ring when child exhaled, though no bell visible. Main had returned, named Kuran Sid, echo between moons. Word raced across province. Silver strides thrummed with caravans bearing offerings. Legion cohorts paused, uncertain protocol. Consulate petitioned potentate for audience, requesting cease troop advance until infant old enough for coronation rites. Versidue Shea, calculating, agreed, provided Elsweyr ratify guild charters and permit Akaviri trade posts. Consulate, desperate not to fight with newborn prophecy at stake, conceded limited posts along coast. Thus, conflict delayed. While child grew, watchers noted, his eyes mirrored desert dusk, even in rainforest humidity, a living union of biomes. At age 5, Kuran Sid embarked on pilgrimage around province, perched upon Sencharat Mount, harnessed in cloth from both cities. Legion escorts rode parallel but never intervened. Kuran Sid's entourage greeted them with sugar cakes infused with calming jasmine. Soldiers wrote home describing eerie peace. When the main reached 10, age Khajiit deemed cusp of juvenile wisdom, he visited Silverstride's quarry where imperial masons cut stone. There he placed paw upon unfinished slab. Artisans claim resonance pulsed through block, ringing like bell. Main uttered phrase recorded phonetically as Sharavir, Tarjat, roughly moon-moved stone. Masons later found each slab cut that day bore perfect curvature to form arch without keystone. They shipped the arch components to Gate of Still Light, assembling them over reflection pool. Upon completion, pearl casket beneath dune and glass. Casket beneath mangrove cracked open simultaneously though leagues apart, each revealing half-bell newly gleaming. Couriers raced, presenting halves at arch site. When joined, bell chimed exactly as sunset lit arch interior, painting crescent shadow across water. The omen convinced even skeptics of Manet's legitimacy. Juzar Dar and Rasavado kneeled. Together, Manet Kuran Sid's first decree recast Compact of Two Moons into a living covenant. Tariffs, roads, and guild charters now linked to bell tones rung nightly from Arch Tower. Each tone corresponded to duty schedule for desert patrols, canal locks, and market open hours. The bell's resonance traveled along new copper wires strung between outposts, vibrating small chimes that tickled Senchi ears. Imperial administrators marveled. Akaviri merchants recorded bell tables to schedule shipments. The province thus remained fluid, yet ordered by consistent music, sound rather than ink. Potentate Versidue Shea, please trade flowed, adopted wait-and-watch stance. The 8th Legion withdrew to Cyrodiilic border forts, but maintained traffic, regulation at Riverhold. Over years, mutual benefit tempered suspicion. Kuran Sid visited Imperial City, presenting sugar sculptures shaped like interlocking moons and dragon. In return, Elder Council gifted astrolabes recalibrated for lunar parallax. Diplomatic equilibrium prevailed until Versidue Shea's assassination by Morag Tong in 2E 324, an event beyond scope of this narration, but one whose shockwave would rattle every province. Elsweyr faced internal aftershocks sooner. Skooma syndicates, emboldened by guild withdrawal post-assassination, entrenched in Tenmar's hidden grottos. Main-directed Whisper Claw Accord resurgence, integrating former Fighters Guild chapter as legal militia overseen by dual bright moons to avoid accusation of imperial favoritism. Raids destroyed stills, yet for every den shuttered, another bloomed, south of Helkarn. Kuran Sid understood suppression alone failed. He introduced Moonshadow Conclave, rehabilitation rituals blending sugar fasts with star meditation in domed sanctuaries lined with reflective glass. Records show half participants returned to trade after 3 moons. Some relapse persisted, but Scourge dulled. By now decades had stacked. Naquinal and Pa'alatin still vied in art, cuisine, and intellectual prowess, yet they treated rivalry as playful mirror within unified frame. Festivals featured friendly contests, dune sculptors carving sugar, statues beside marsh chefs brewing spiced cane soup, scholars debating star ephemerides versus tidal harmonics. The border between city influences blurred into gradient. One could stand upon Silver Stride mile marker, taste desert grit on wind while smelling river lotus, and feel truth of Elsweyr under twin lanterns. The bell tower above the Gate of Still Light did not fall silent when the Morag tongs poisoned. Daggers found potentate Versidue Shea in the gardens of the White Gold. Its bronze mouth continued to exhale measured dusk tones, and the copper wires the main had strung along the silver strides continued to vibrate each evening, humming against the ribs of watchposts from the Tenmar frontier to the dune bastions of Riverhold. Yet the music travelled through new air, an air hurried by rumour, thickened by the shaving sharp scent that clings to empires when succession turns suddenly upon the point of a blade. In distant Cyrodiil, a young general named Talos, born of the bleak clouds over Atmora's ghost coasts, pressed his palm against the dragon banner and felt it shudder as though some caged heart had opened one eye. All along the borders of Elsweyr, scouts began to glimpse campfires on ridges where none had burned before, blue coils of smoke drifting up through cedar and juniper like question marks in the late afternoon heat haze. At first, nothing came of it. The Crescent Consulate, trusting to treaties penned under the potentate's seal, watched with polite interest while Cyrodiilic marshals bickered over titles. Mane Kuran Sid, now full grown and wearing a tail braid as thick as the mast of a sugar bark, sent courtesy messages to the Elder Council, perfumed parchment thanking them for the latest shipment of star-shot serpent stone from the Heartlands, requesting only that the guild inspectors posted in Torval respect local fast days. The replies arrived on fine vellum, stamped with imperialist seals but signed in hesitant, patient hand, promising that yes, of course, customs officials would show due reverence. The couriers who carried those letters whispered that 9 different factions within the council now claimed stewardship of the late potentate's trade guarantees. Each insisted the others would be formally recognized the moment a new emperor secured the Ruby Throne. In the meantime, every province, Black Marsh, Hammerfell, High Rock, was encouraged to maintain its existing obligations and above all, to remain calm. Calm is a shallow pool in the desert. All it takes is one pebble, and the mirrored moon fractures. The pebble fell in winter of 2E 854, on a night when Joan and Joe drifted almost directly over the Colovian frontier. At Fort Riverhold, a caravan of Sathe Rat cloth merchants attempted to pass the gate after dusk with special dispensation from local bright moons. They carried bales woven in the pattern of Ridthar's spiral and destined for chapel banners in Anvil. But the fort's new lictor, appointed only 10 days earlier by a transitional Cyrodiilic prefect, demanded double tariff, claiming the earlier treaty scrolls bore signatures rendered invalid by the potentate's death. The merchants resisted, witnesses recall raised voices, and one caravan guard, a Cathay Rat named Darjo, laid hand upon his curved crater glass scimitar. Imperial archers loosed warning arrows. The scene might have ended with some bruised pride and a few confiscated. Bolts of cloth had the fort's outer gate not groaned wide at that instant to admit a column of legionaries bound for Somerset. Horses spooked at the smell of senche. Legionaries shouted. Amid the confusion, someone loosed a real arrow. Darjo fell with the fletchings between his ribs, moon-inked cloth blooming crimson beneath him. By dawn, river rumour had carried the name Darjo returned to every watchtower on the Sugar Road. Within 3 nights, the gate of Still Lightbell changed pitch. Instead of the mid-evening triplet note that signalled peaceful caravan flow, it struck a syncopated double cut called the Broken Mane's Claw. Record keepers marked the tone as one used only twice before in living memory, both times to warn of imminent foreign incursion. Mane Kuransid dispatched emissaries to Riverhold bearing twin demands: restitution for Darjo's death and immediate confirmation that imperial tariff tables would remain bound to the lunar calendar. The fort's lictor requested time. His courier had to ride to Central by the Sea, where a regional prefect awaited orders from yet another provisional regent in the capital. The delay served nobody. Along the Rimvold's foothills, Cathay Rat militia began drilling with long talon pikes. In Palatine's cane villages, harbour masters quietly halted shipment of refraction-grade moon glass, knowing it would fetch double value if embargo caused shortage up north. Then, Talos took Sankator. The mountain city's fall sent shockwaves across every provincial chancery. In Elsweyr, bright moons and caravan syndics met beneath Torval's domes of hush glass to ask a single question. When the dragon banner unfurls, does it cast shadow as far as Tenmar's deepest fern? Opinions fractured along the old dune and delta fault line. Ni Quinol's war guilds, led by silver ink scribes who remembered the Alessian pikes, argued the province should close its passes and sharpen its claws. Palatine's sugar magnates countered that any standoff would freeze exports, ruin harvest projections, and provoke retaliatory naval blockades along the Topol. The Mani withheld judgment, retreating to the spiral meditation halls of Dune, where he walked in circles beneath lanterns tuned to catch only the palest fractional light of Secunda. Some claimed he conversed with unseen spirits of the moons. Others believed he weighed prophecy against the price of blood. Talos moved like a cold front over mountains. By 2E 857, his generals had pacified Bruma and levelled the last Colovian holdouts. Imperial recruiters, now wearing cobalt cloaks bearing the nascent sigil of the Third Empire, arrived at Riverhold offering positions to Khajiit volunteer auxiliaries. Some joined, drawn by the promise of steady pay and chance to march beneath new banners, but most warily recalled Darjo. In Torval, a new, and at first whispered, society formed. The Silent Sugarmoot, a collective of cane chemists, caravan path readers, and whisper claw veterans, dedicated to guarding Elsweyr's sweet lattice from external monopolies. Their first act was subtle. They altered the order of scarring on sugar mold stamps so that imperial buyers would not realize some bricks came from embargoed plantations. The ruse bought time, but time can turn also into noose. Spring of 2E 858, Talos's quartermasters arrived at Palatine with requisition orders authorizing voluntary purchase of 90% of moon sugar output for legion rations and medicinal tinctures. The magnates balked. Khajiit have long understood moon sugar in moderation sharpens the night senses of soldiers, but 90% meant famine price scarcity for common households. Negotiations dragged until the harvest reached its critical, boiling phase. Cane boilers could not wait lest the juice sour. Imperial agents, frustrated, filed reports to General Symmachus stationed in Gideon. The reply came not in ink, but in steel. A flotilla of coastal triremes flying the dragon sailed past Central and dropped anchor near the Cane Delta. Marines disembarked with sealed crates stamped Logistics Command. The crates contained not swords, but lanthanum-reinforced gears and boiler coils. portable stills patterned after Dwemer diagrams flushed from the Niben archives. Legion engineers assembled them on the muddy flats like siege engines. The sight of foreign furnaces eating Khajiit cane lit sparks in every tavern from Torval to Rimmen. A band of Tojay Rat dockhands, faces streaked with river silt, sabotaged a gear spindle on the third night, causing a still to collapse in hissing steam. Imperial Marines reacted by imposing dusk curfew. 2 elders, caught hauling medicinal sugar past checkpoint, were whipped. Word leapt upriver. Pa'alatin's lords begged Mane Kuransid for swift arbitration. The Mane convened an emergency conclave of bright moons on the dunes east of Orcrest, ancestral land where sand holds echo of earliest lunar treaties. There, under twin gibbous moons, the priests performed the balance dust rite, flinging powdered sugar into wind from the north, dust of basalt from south, measuring how the crystals mingled. Consensus blew uneven. Sugar drifted low, basalt soared. Portent clear. The south risked subjugation. Kuransid rode south astride a white senche, whose stripes formed perfect crescents. He arrived at the Delta encampment not with banners, but with a single bell, older than Shajara Doe's twin halves, rumoured to contain Lorkhaj's sai captured in brass. He demanded parley with the local marine tribune. Accounts differ on tone. Khajiiti lore claims he spoke with gentle wind voice. Imperial diaries maintain he threatened cease of all sugar trade if stills not dismantled. Either way, tribunes stalled, citing orders from above. The Mane struck bell once. Observers swear the note reverberated through cane stalks, causing leaves to jitter as if insects crawled on every blade. At dawn, Legion engineers found their stills clogged by crystalline accretions so hard chisels sparked against them. They accused saboteurs. Pa'alatin's workers professed ignorance. The Tribune telegraphed Gideon for reinforcement. Talos's war council chose caution. A message returned ordering withdrawal, pending renegotiation. Stills were loaded, back on triremes. The flotilla raised anchor and vanished north beyond Topol's horizon. Crisis passed, yet scars linger. In the months that followed, the silent Sugarmoot built hidden caches of reserve crystals in grottos reachable only at low tide. Caravan captains began double-sealing sugar crates with wax glyphs that melted if opened away from moonlight. Imperials found their shipments fused into useless lumps. Tensions sharpened into what later historians call the Sugar Lane Rebellions. The first to ignite was a small incident near Verkath city. A squad of Legion tax collectors seized 7 barrels suspected of containing contraband skooma. They tapped 1 barrel to test, discovered only cane molasses, but dumped the contents anyway, to make certain. Local farmers, incensed at the waste, pelted the squad with date stones. A scuffle, a sword drawn. 2 farmers bled out on dusty road. Within a week, 20 caravans refused to pay gate tolls. Imperial fort at Verkath shuttered its portcullis. Insurgents set the wooden bridge alight behind them, singing the old spiral hymn in counter-rhythm to whickering horses. The Imperial commander in Rimmen, Prefectus Longinus Ularic, known for quelling Hammerfell tax riots, requested reinforcements. He received instead a curt directive from Talos's chancellor: hold Elsweyr by example, not annihilation, lest sugar trade fail. Longinus tried diplomacy. He invited bright moons from Torval to a feast where Nibonese chefs baked moon sugar into almond crust pies. A gesture of respect, he hoped. Sadly, Khajiiti custom forbade sweet consumption during the midsummer fasting period of Lorkhaj's remembrance, and the priest politely declined. Feeling slighted, the prefect doubled gate taxes at Rimmen. 3 nights later, his mansion's stables burned, and the Whisperclaw Accord left a single jade claw hanging from the charred lintel. The guerrilla phase unfolded swiftly. Cathay Rat companies melted into the Alabaster Canyons, staging hit-and-run attacks on supply wagons. In Palatine, marshbred Tojay remained outwardly cooperative, but guided Imperial patrols into tide mud where boot heels sank like stones. Mane Kuransid tried to restrain bloodshed, sending scented scrolls to both rebels and forts, reminding them the Bell law decreed violence only in self-defense. But bells travel on air. Swords travel faster on sinew. In 8 months, Legion logbooks recorded 106 bandit incidents, while Khajiit chronicles record exactly half that, claiming the rest were Legion drunkenness or inter-guild. Turf wars. Talos, campaigning through Hammerfell, studied these numbers. He understood attrition. He also understood hearts, how to claim them, or failing that, bend them. In Frostfall 2E 860, he dispatched General Septimus Tharn with explicit charter: subdue province swiftly by demonstrating the Pax Dragonis. Empire grants infrastructure, law, and open markets in exchange for loyalty. Septima marched south with the 15th Legion, veterans of Sanka Tor, and newly forged Sunbird heavy cavalry. They halted at Riverhold and issued an edict promising restore damaged caravan roads, compensate victims of Verkath incident from Imperial coffers, honor lunar tariff variations, provided the main present a formal oath of fealty at the Rimmen Amphitheatre during the next convergence, when Joan and Jode appear as overlapping crescents. The consulate splintered anew. Niquinal scribes insisted that fealty meant annexation. Pa'alatin lords murmured that compensation and road repairs sounded profitable. Mane Kuransid faced a dilemma whose horns his predecessors never grasped. Could a Mane swear loyalty without surrendering the moons? He convened the Spiral Council beneath the hush-glass domes. There, in a chamber open to night sky, 64 clergy, merchants, and militia captains debated for 7 dawns. On the 8th, while Joan hung as slender hook and Jode a swelling lantern, the Main stood, unbraided his tail, and severed 12 bells, one for each major clan. He placed the bells on the sandstone floor in a circle, then stepped into center and rebraided what remained into single coil. Scholars present described shimmering motes of dust rising from his pelt. He spoke only once. The moons bind, the bell guides. The path walks itself. Interpretation varied. Some heard capitulation, others defiance. The Main departed without clarifying. On the appointed night in Rimmen, General Septima waited beneath stone arches carved by long-gone Niben artisans. Twin moons converged to bright Mandorla. Into the arena strode the Mane, not in ceremonial silk, but in desert travel cloak. He carried Ridthar's spiral staff, though that relic belonged by rights to the temple archives. Thousands watched. Legionaries, merchants, Alphic scribes perched on railings. What words passed between Main and General remain unknown. Scribes stationed close enough heard only the roar of the crowd's hushed breathing. But they saw Kuransid take the General's offered sword, raise it skyward, blade catching twinned lunar rays, then plant it tip first into sand. He stepped back, left it quivering upright, and rang his last remaining bell 3 times. High, low, high. Then he turned, mounted his Senche, and left by northern gate, not south. The meaning crystallized only later. He had given no fealty, but neither had he raised weapon. The sword in the sand signified boundary. Undefined, Septima Tharn, reputed. Pragmatist, declared partial victory. The Mane had appeared and accepted Legion hospitality, proof of constructive dialogue. She ordered the road crews to start paving the final leg of the Silver Strides to Torval, hoping goodwill might follow. But among the insurgents, the bell's tritone meant curfew lifted. Guerrillas redoubled strikes on outposts, careful to avoid. Civilian harm but ruthless toward patrols transporting tax levies. The Imperial Treasury bled drafts of sugar coin shipments failing to arrive. 2 winters dragged. Talos's patience thinned. Reports from northern theatres spoke of Nords pledging loyalty after a single hard campaign. Bretons, half charmed, half coerced, now minted coins bearing his dragon effigy. Yet the crescent land still danced out of reach. He resolved to clip its wings. In 2E863, he gave Septima leave to launch Operation Moonfall, seize Torval in lightning strike, occupy Temple of Bright Moons, and impound the Archbell, whose resonance coordinated province-wide logistics. Strategy leaned on surprise. Mariners from Anvil would land north of the Tenmar while Legion riders advanced from Rimmen. But the silent Sugarmoot's information net rooted deep in every port. Within days, whispers reached the Main's meditation grove outside Dune. Legend says he pressed both palms into sand, listening. When he stood, grains fell like tears. Khajiiti defense hinged on mobility and morale. Quran Sid invoked the oldest, caravan law. All roads are one under peril. Caravan masters rallied. Sugar wagons converted to troop carriers. Senche mounts donned chain harness woven of alloy wire that glimmered like frost. Path readers adjusted beacon lantern codes, flashing sequences that confounded Imperial scouts who thought they'd cracked earlier cipher. When Legion Vanguard rolled across Riverhold, they found supply caches burnt, wells poisoned with harmless but pungent glow nectar that sickened horses. Meanwhile, Pa'alatin fishermen led Anvil Marines upriver into Mangrove Labyrinth, then vanished. At dawn, the Marines discovered themselves 50 miles off course, surrounded by fog and the echo of reed whistles signaling unseen archers. The pivotal clash came not at Torval, but at the steppe of purring earth, a plateau where subterranean gas vents caused the ground to vibrate softly under moonlight, a sensation akin to a great cat's contented hum. Legion engineers wanted the high, ground for siege ballistae. Khajiiti commanders, led by Jusara Dar's former lieutenant Jaresh Senchekin, resolved to deny them. Battle unfolded over 2 nights. First night, skirmishers cut supply mules, scattering them into ravines. Second, when Legion formed square, the ground began to tremble more violently. Some natural tremor, perhaps, or sabotage, historians debate. Vibrations spooked the Legion's Nibonese-bred horses. Khajiit claimed the land itself chose side. When dawn broke, Imperial Square had shattered. Casualties moderate, but confidence broken. General Septima called halt. She sent courier to Talos requesting permission to negotiate autonomy provision. Arguing occupation would cost more than sugar's value. Talos, deep in consultation with Sijic envoys concerning Numidium rumor, saw merit. He dispatched Dragon, guard lawyer scribes with compromise. Elsweyr to remain sovereign under Main, pay tribute in coin and arms levies, but keep internal tariff system. Imperial garrisons limited to border forts. Kuransid accepted on 2 conditions. Legion sign pact under both moons simultaneously, and sword planted in Rimmen Arena be returned unbroken. Ceremony held midsummer 2E864. Sword retrieved, its hilt pitted with rust but blade still bright. The Main took it, snapped off tip with bare paw, handed fragments to Septima as token. War can be reforged, but edge now blunted. The Pact of Rimmen entered archives. Over next decade, sugar lanes reopened. Imperial roads integrated moons into milestone, carving so itinerant Khajiit could read phase calendars at noon by shadow length. Trade flourished, but skooma syndicates too. To counter, the Mene and silent Sugarmoot unveiled the lattice seal, combining lunar resin with tamrielic paraffin to create tamper-proof jars. Legion quartermasters adopted the seal. Black market prices soared, but product rarer. Violence ebbed. Elsweyr thus adapted, absorbing Empire's weight without losing flex in spine. Talos ascended as Tiber Septim in 2E896, proclaiming Third Era. He invited Manikuran Sid to coronation feast. The Main, aging yet unbowed, travelled atop crystal-laced palanquin, presenting gift, parchment titled Riddlethar Counterpoint, a text aligning lunar lattice with concept of unified empire. arguing that stability comes from acknowledging both constant sun and shifting moons. Tiber listened, perhaps amused, perhaps enlightened. Some suggest this conversation seeded later concordat with Sijic monks. Kuran-Sid died peacefully decade later, bells distributed as before, into many pores. Next Manet to rise, Jaziri Komar, found a province keyed to subtle harmony, imperial, milestones along Sugar Road, yet caravan drums still beating desert three-count, cane presses humming, yet silent Sugarmoot now licensing their still technology to imperial apothecaries under strict quotas. In City Archives of White Gold 1, finds memorandum from Chancellor Akato, centuries later citing Elsweyr as model of limited sovereignty, but the moons turn, and each rotation brings eclipse somewhere. Thus, the long shadow of empire fell, receded, and lingers still, like twilight that neither fully yields nor fully claims. A grey hush where bell tones travel farther than swords, where sugar crystals glint like small captured stars, and where every Khajiit, from desert Cathay Rat to marshborn Tojay, walks with the knowledge that empires march, empires bargain, empires fade. But the moons above remain twin and patient, sketching their eternal spiral on the breathing sands of Elsweyr. In the years after the Pact of Rimmon, the bell over the gate of still light settled back into its effortless cadence. The copper wires along the silver strides settled into an almost inaudible shiver each dusk, and Elsweyr breathed again, not with the startled gasp of war, but with the slow exhale of a land remembering its own pulse. Those who walked the sugar roads in that quiet found themselves surrounded by a flowering of art and ritual, so patient, so deeply rooted, that even the distant rumble of an expanding empire could not drown it. This was the age in which the province shifted its center of gravity away from skirmish and statute and toward the shape of living itself, an age in which every caravan stop, every rooftop, every cup of morning milk became an echo of the moons, long conversation with the sands and the rivers and the people poised between. At dawn along the trade road north of Tenmar, Suthay Rat cooks rose first, kindling low fires beneath copper pots inlaid with desert jasper. Into these pots went a paste of date flesh and powdered sugar, stirred with slow circular strokes until the mixture glistened. When the consistency turned silken, they added a whisper of crushed juniper berry, light enough to prickle on the tongue yet never overwhelm the sweetness. This jam, called jazak, was spooned onto flatbread baked the night before, bread so thin it could be folded thrice and slipped into a caravanner's sash. The scent of juniper carried on the morning. Air and soldiers posted at border forts longed for it without knowing its name. Such humble cuisine, repeated campfire after campfire, did more to cement the Pax Dragonis than any clause in the pact, for it lent the whole crescent an aroma that belonged nowhere else in Tamriel. To the south, in Cane country, where dawn is thick with humidity, Palatine's planters practiced their own morning rites. Long boats slipped from reed-woven docks into canals dark as flasks of night. Each carried a square of polished tamar wood engraved with the family's tree sigil. The boatman placed the sigil board atop the water before poling downstream. If the board floated ahead of the prow, it foretold a good harvest of sugar by next full jode. Should it lag behind, the crew burned a lock of tail fur at the stern as an appeasement. A simple ritual, but one that braided commerce with cosmos, the flow of cane with the flow of twin lanterns. Under Ridthar's earlier codex, Khajiiti households marked every meal's blessing by turning their bowls a quarter-circle widdershins before the first bite. After the Sugar Lane rebellions and the wary peace that followed, the Mainz clergy revisited the gesture, adding a whispered recitation said, once only per household each day. It went, Joan guides, Jode guards, Lorkaj laughs, Alkosh counts, 8 words, one for each major clan within the lunar clergy's register. This daily breath, connected homes as remote as Orcrest's dune shacks and Alatian's lagoon villas. Travelers who forgot the phrase found themselves gently corrected by innkeepers, for every Khajiit felt the subtle pleasure of instructing a stranger in the correct turn of the bowl. Yet if daily meals carried the quiet pulse of belief, festival nights drew that pulse into thundering life. The greatest among these celebrations was the walkabout of bright sugar, held once each year during the first waxing of Jode after mid-year. It began on the silent plains outside Rimmon, when desert winds lay still and the horizon shimmered like tempered glass. Thousands gathered in a vast, irregular circle, lit only by wind lanterns whose translucent paper parted the darkness with sheets of gold. At the center, a spiral of moonstone dust marked the starting line. Along its curves, bowls of sugar turned amber beneath tiny oil wicks. When the Mane himself arrived, always on foot, tail braided with only 3 bells for modesty, he took the first step into the spiral. Behind him strode musicians playing reed pipes with a low, breathy timbre meant to imitate Kenarthi's sky whisper. Caravans fell in line, and entire families walked through the night on bare paws, chanting in a trance-like hum that never rose above conversation, yet carried for miles. They circled inward, round and round, until dawn's first silver climbed the horizon, and the spiral ended at a raised pavilion of cedar and copper. There, sugar priests offered the pilgrims a single pinch of freshly ground crystal. The custom forbade more than that. Those who swallowed too much sugar after the long walk risked hallucinations that could unmoor a mind from the lattice of time, what the elders called falling off the moons. Yet none who ever tasted that first pinch forgot the flavor, a purity that cut deeper than sweetness, a reminder of Lorcage's gift and the shape of boundless possibility. Every pilgrim, whether desert nomad or cane scribe, spoke afterward of the same sensation, a brief widening of vision in which the boundary between skin and starlight dissolved like salt in water. For those few breaths, they remembered paths taken and untaken, lives stored in the moon's hidden ledger. If tears followed, they fell without shame. Not all sugar, of course, travelled such sacred routes. The darker cousin of the crystal, skooma, stalked the province like shadow at noon. In alleyways off Torval's Grand Promenade, the dens hung lanterns of green glass to draw patrons. Green because the colour hides vapours, and a smoker engulfed by haze forgets how much he breathes. Under the Pax Dragonis, imperial magistrates tried to license these dens, reasoning that regulations starved the criminal underbelly of profit. Khajiiti civic leaders, however, invoked a deeper concern. Skooma unspools the mind from Jakaje, the lunar tether. A Khajiit lost in sugar dreams might ignore the bells that guide each day's cadence, and the clergy feared that such lapses strained the entire cosmic lattice. Thus, the Whisperclaw Accord returned to prominence. Agents in plain linen robes slipped among den patrons posing as harmless scribes, marking which owners diluted product with pink leaf extract to increase weight. Diluted skooma could seize the chest or induce seizures. A single midnight raid might shut down a dozen such operations. When imperial patrols witnessed these swift, silent strikes, they generally turned aside, claiming no jurisdiction over religious house cleaning. Each closed den earned the Mane's court a small tithe, later given to hospice clinics along sugar routes where cutters treated caravanners with sunstroke. Parallel to this moral calculus ran the constant hum of trade. Caravans, once simple affairs of cinch mounts and flat sleds, evolved into 3-tier convoys under a standardized charter developed jointly by the Crescent Consulate and the Imperial Commercial Commission. The lead tier, called the Moon Nose, carried 2 functions, pathfinding and omen reading. Its scouts were usually Alfic or stooped omers with preternatural memory for dune contours. They watched the night sky through periscope tubes of polished obsidian, plotting the stars' drift against known landmarks. 100 yards behind them trailed the Heart Carriage, a long wagon fitted with copper vibration rods tuned to the bell at gate of still light. When the bell struck, rods hummed. If a note deviated, say, a storm snapped the distant wire, caravan masters altered route accordingly, anticipating trouble ahead. Finally came the tail lock, a rotating guard of Cathay Rat and sometimes Imperial auxiliary archers, who manned lightweight ballistae built by dwarven machinists under license from the Mages Guild. Dust devils that prowled the dunes learned to keep their distance once those ballistae sank a bolt into their glassy hides. In Palatine, river convoys mirrored this structure on water. Canal wanderers lashed reed rafts together into floating islands called shodaro, water towns. Each shodaro carried cane barrels stacked in labyrinthine towers. On the upper decks, musicians played slow cadence drums, warning fishers along the banks not to cross under the raft's shadow, lest a toppling barrel crush them. When nights grew stifling and insects swam the air, sailors hung damp cloths between mast poles and waited for Joan's faint light to coax breeze across the deck. The moons served as clocks here too. Entire leagues of canal opened or closed, depending on whether Secunda sat above or below the branch of an ancient mangrove on the southern horizon. Imperial investors who tried mapping the sprawling network found their charts useless after one season, for the river routes silted and rerouted like living veins. Wise merchants hired Tojai guides who knew the tide's secret schedule, guides whose fees rose each year but were worth every drake. Architecture kept pace with trade. Nequinal's libraries adopted a new facade style known as twinned horizon masonry. Two slanted gables meeting in a blunt apex, echoing Joan and Jode at half phase. Builders layered sandstone slabs with mortar laced in powdered ebony dust, giving the walls a subtle night shine when moons rose. In the reading chamber, skylights cut by Dwemer precision let in only that pale lunar glow. No torches were allowed, lest their smoke corrupt the delicate scrolls. Scholars trained their eyes for low-light reading by practicing on blank parchment for hours, tracing imaginary lines until they could discern the faintest ink hue. Visitors spoke in hushed tones of the inkless library where knowledge appeared, only under Moonkiss. South of the 10-mile walk, Kane Estates erected new manor houses whose wide verandas perched above water like lily pads. The pillars supporting these verandas were carved from single trunks of driftwood, bark left intact to honor Kenathi's storms. House walls shone with white lime plaster mixed with pulverized quail shell, a finish that reflected sunlight so thoroughly even midday heat could not bake the interior. The floors, however, bore dark lacquered panels of wenwood whose swirling grain resembled cloud patterns. Walking barefoot on those cool panels after hours in the fields was said to draw fever from the bones. Estate scribes developed a script that mimicked the grain, curved and nested, an artful deception to foil those who tried to copy production ledgers. Across all Elsweyr, language evolved in step with stone and sugar. The old dialects diverged further, then braided. Desert Khajiit had always clipped their consonants, conserving breath. Cane folk stretched vowels like reeds in wind, claiming the sound cooled the mouth. But after the pacts, travelling performers called moon rhythms toured market squares, reciting ancestral myths in alternating dialect lines so that listeners learned to anticipate each other's cadence. Children repeated these poems during play. Soon a new accent emerged, a middle tongue known as Jakati, that scholars liken to the subtle buffering at the seam of two tapestries. It never replaced the elder dialects, but served as bridge in tavern banter. Even imperial quartermasters learned enough Jakati to haggle. In the high desert west of Orcrest, stonemasons discovered a quarry of pink-hued granite flecked with tiny silver grains. They named the material Skin of Joan for the colour, matched the moon's faint blush during certain eclipses. From this stone, they carved 12 monumental pillars, each taller than a centaurate on hind legs. The pillars stood in a circle around a sunken amphitheatre, the Path Mercy Ring, where disputes of honor were settled not by duel of blades, but by duel of memory. Opponents recited lineage histories, caravan precedents, moon cycle laws. The first to misquote lost. A panel of Alphic elders judged accuracy, scratching scores into wax boards with their claws. The Empire's officials, intrigued, dispatched scribes to record a match. Names and dates flew like sparks. One scribe collapsed from exhaustion, unable to transcribe fast enough. The Khajiit said memory duels were not for recording, but for clearing clouded hearts. When the Empire later attempted to codify the rules, the elders merely laughed and said, "Bring parchment to the wind if you like, it still blows." While memory shaped the ring, vision shaped the Hall of Mirrors in Torval. Conceived by a coalition of cane magnates and artisans, the hall comprised a series of long chambers, lined floor to ceiling, with octagonal mirrors backed in thin flakes of crater glass. Each mirror was angled with such precision that a single, candle set at the entrance illuminated the entire hall. Guests entered barefoot, carrying the candle, and walked slow so as not to extinguish the flame. Every heartbeat echoed from glass, every subtle sway of flame multiplied into thousandfold. Flicker, widely regarded as an attempt to capture starlight indoors, the hall also served as diplomatic venue. There, emissaries faced reflections of themselves from dozens of angles, the notion being that one who can see every side of his face will speak less rashly. No treaty inked in that venue ever broke within a generation, or so the saying went. Village life, far from cities and halls, followed its own calendar of miracle. In the foothills of the Newman Heights, small hamlets raised wood pigeons with feathers speckled silver. These birds, bred for generations, flew only at night, navigating by Jode's glow. They carried tiny clay ampules of moon sugar remedy, a pinch of crystal dissolved in dew gathered at precisely the midpoint of twilight. Such remedy eased feverish children when access to temple clinics proved distant. One bird could find its way to a healer in Alabaster, 20 leagues off, guided by lantern signals only it could see. Once delivery dropped, the bird circled thrice, under secunda, before returning to roost. Imperial apothecaries, hearing of these pigeons, offered gold shipments for breeding pairs. The hamlets declined politely, citing a covenant that no price outweighed the relief of a sick kit. Relief of spirit was the domain of the sugar halls, found in nearly every settlement big enough to boast a market. A sugar hall looked outwardly like a simple tavern, but within, the main chamber comprised tiered benches arranged in concentric ovals around a central hearth. On the hearth stood a large brass wok, its rim etched with the phases of the moons. A sugarmaster tended the wok, slowly stirring a thick, bubbling mass of cane sap, blended with dried berry husk and sea salt. Patrons did not eat in silence. They chanted refrains chosen by the master, a repertoire of old desert sagas, playful canework songs, sometimes riddle script verses in Jakati. The chanting affected the sugar, or so the masters swore. They explained that words vibrate the sap in precise ways, altering crystallization when the mixture cools. Thus, each batch of sugar candy carried subtle imprint of the voices that sang it into being. Regular patrons claimed they could taste the difference between a batch stirred by rowdy sailors and one blessed by temple novices. The first left a sting like fresh ginger. The second dissolved into cool eucalyptus. Imperial inspectors, invited to test the theory, found no measurable variance, but admitted privately they preferred the temple batch. Behind every cheerful sugar hall door lurked the quiet covenant of the Khajiit clergy. At high noon, when even the bravest trader napped under awnings, priests visited each hall carrying handheld astrolabes wrought of copper and starglass. They held these to the skylight, checking that the tiny central disk pivoted true along the sun's arc. If alignment drifted, meaning the hall roof sagged or the skylight edge warped, the priest marked the site for maintenance. Proper skylight. Orientation ensured that moonbeams on festival nights struck the hearth precisely, infusing the sugar with Joan's memory. Hall owners who neglected repairs risked losing the right to display the crescent scar plaque, granted only to compliant vendors, and such a loss could ruin reputation quicker than 1,000 wagging tongues. While sugar shaped the palate and voice, the moons shaped the body. Every Khajiit born under them belonged to one of the famed fur stocks, Omaze or Alfic, Suthe or Cathay, and so on. But folk medicine insisted that beyond the visible, each person carried an inner hinge aligned to either Joan or Jode. Healers tested this by simple breath. The patient inhaled deeply through mouth and exhaled across a thin reed flute tuned to a minor third. If the note remained pure, the hinge favored Joan, the quick and clever. If it wavered slightly flat, the hinge leaned to Jode, the slow and steady. Prescription followed accordingly. A Joan-dominant warp in the lungs demanded syrup of desert fig taken at dawn. A Jode-leaning melancholy called for decoction of night blossom, steeped until the petals bruised indigo. Imperial physicians considered this superstition, yet travelling legates often begged desert folk for the fig syrup after weeks of breathless marching. Music, too, obeyed lunar hinge. Desert drums, carved from dried senchi hide, were tuned just, sharp of standard pitch, a quality said to ride Joan's swift beat. Marsh reed flutes, by contrast, sank a quarter tone flat to evoke Jode's gravity. When ensembles comprised both drums and flutes, particularly during the Festival of Deleted Shadows, they encountered inevitable tension. Instead of forcing unison, composers wrote oscillating motifs, allowing the two tonalities to weave like dancers who sometimes touch, sometimes pass without handshake. The effect resembled a quavering shimmer in the night air. It lulled children and confounded foreigners, who likened the sound to half song, half distant memory. Such oscillation extended beyond stage into language rhythms. Storytellers adopted a device called the rhythmic pause. They broke sentences mid-phrase whenever the first moon climbed above a rooftop. In practice, this meant that during evenings of waxing, Joan's stories quickened, sentences shortened. On nights of waning, clauses stretched long like river eddies. Many a new imperial mercenary, drunk in roadside inn, fell asleep halfway through what seemed a single sentence, only to wake at dawn, realizing the storyteller still spoke. The Khajiiti audience took no offense. Stories were rivers, and some rivers took more than one night to reach the sea. As for sea, ships from Senchal rode a rising tide of exploration. After Pax Dragonis, imperial cartographers opened contracts to any captain willing to chart unknown passages to Payandanea fogbanks or Yoku ruins along Hammerfell's southern archipelagos. Khajiiti shipwrights responded by perfecting the double crescent outrigger. Two curved hulls lashed in parallel, their tips flaring upward like blades. The design balanced speed with cargo capacity, critical when transporting moonglass lanterns to far ports. Each outrigger bore the same prow insignia, a stylized sugarcane over dunes, carved from drift ivory. Crews painted the inside hull with mixture of cane ash and crushed pearl, creating subtle luminescence that guided night maneuvers without betraying position to pirates. Pirates, in turn, learned to steer clear, for Alfic quartermasters kept caged desert wasps on deck. Uncapped, they swarmed any boarding party, their stings inducing a maddening itch rumored to last weeks. However advanced the sea lanes, the heart of culture remained the night sky. Observatory shrines dotted both desert spires and mangrove crowns. Each shrine employed two keeper pairs, one record scribe, one dream scribe. A record scribe plotted star drift on vellum using astrolabe. A dream scribe took powdered moon sugar in small, carefully weighed doses, lay upon cooled obsidian slab, and attempted to dream the next alignment. They spoke little daylight. By tradition, Dream scribes recorded visions only with a single line representing the horizon, above which they inked arcs and spirals. Record scribes then compared these to measured star roads. Coincidence rated high. Divergence spurred recalibration of sugar dosage. Imperial Mages Guild observers visited once, declared dream mapping unreliable, yet returned a decade later after a dream scribe spiral predicted a meteor shower that rained glass upon Anvil's harbour. The Mages Guild offered grants. The shrine accepted only enough to build another observatory deeper in Tenmar, where clouds seldom interrupted horizon. Religious life beyond shrine walls embraced dual currents, public ritual and private pact. The public knew the grand festivals, yet private pact manifested in countless small acts. A child entering adulthood, for example, carved his name into the soft underside of a dune cypress root, exposed by wind. He then covered it with a flat stone inscribed with the number matching his lunar hinge. He told no one its location. If later he lost his sense of self, caught in skooma haze, grief, or warring illusions, he could find the root, brush away sand, read his given name, and, remember, the Empire, ever hungry for census, once asked to map these roots. The request fell away like sand through claws, for names are wind seeds, best left buried until they sprout necessity. Imperial soldiers garrisoned at border forts eventually absorbed bits of such custom, so much so that uniform regulations faced odd hurdles. One directive forbade dangling ornaments on armor, yet many Khajiit auxiliaries tied small bells or carved sugar crystals to their belts, claiming the noise disoriented scavenger beasts. An amicable compromise emerged. Units stationed in Elsweyr could wear talismans provided they matched the cohort's lunar hinge, white stone for Jode, blue for Joan. By the time Tiber Septim issued his universal code of military justice, Elsweyr's auxiliaries had carved a unique place in the Legion ethos, half soldiers, half interpreters of cosmic rhythm. Their marching cadence included a half-beat pause every 13th step, mirroring the hidden 13th moon glimpsed only in the main's vision. Officers found it odd, but let it pass. Desert campaigns benefited from troops who could navigate under starlight alone. Time turned like sugar stirred in pan, slow at first, then quick as it thickened. The wheel of years carried on its spokes. The Knahaten flew, the Oblivion Crisis, the re-emergence of Aldmeri Dominion, each to be told in later chapter. Yet beneath those seismic events, the everyday tapestry remained, woven of juniper-scented dawns and hammocks strung between cane poles, of reed whistle songs and mirrored lantern heat. Travelers who recorded only politics missed the deep emotions. The silent way a caravan paused mid-journey when Jode's disc brushed a thin cloud, everyone looking up as if summoned. The hush that slipped through even drunken taverns when an elder began a story, allowing rhythmic pauses to guide breath. The flash of green glass lantern in alley, hinting at temptations some fell to, others resisted. The hushed glass domes of Torval capturing moon gleam like snow left unstepped. All these pieces, food and medicine, trade networks and memory jewels, reed flutes and sugar hall chatter, overlapped as dunes overlap when wind changes. No historian could label any single strand as the soul of the province, for the soul lay precisely in the overlap. The foreign merchant biting date sugar at dawn, the cane scribe leaning out veranda to watch dust devils on distant desert, the desert hunter crouched by river delta, marveling at egrets lifting into indigo dusk. Elsewhere, always else and always where, forever both. Late one evening, 5 summers after the Path Mercy Ring's dedication, Manaj Aziri Komar stood at gate of still light, newly repaired bell above him. He listened to its 3 soft notes drift over reflection pool, watched the ripples fold once, twice, then settle. Beyond the walls, caravans creaked, and from a sugar hall nearby floated faint laughter layered in alternating dialect. Jaziri closed his eyes, imagining the voices as light refracted through countless panes of crater glass, each glimmer different, yet all part of one lantern. When he opened his eyes, Joan and Jode shone above, their radiance mirrored on the water so perfectly it seemed another sky lay below. Between twin heavens, the land exhaled, and for that breathless instant, the pact of Rimmon felt ages old, the dragon-thrown continents away, and only the heartbeat of the moons, in sky and pool, mattered. The main raised his tail, bells trembling. Merchants beyond the gate paused. Soldiers in watchtowers leaned. The bells rang a simple triplet measure: high, low, high. The same pattern Kuran Sid had struck at Rimmon Arena. Neither surrender nor defiance, but boundary, invitation, memory. The sound drifted outward, carried by wind smelling of cane and desert spice. Somewhere, a sugar master began to stir his wok. Somewhere else, a path reader adjusted the lantern code for dawn departure. The living lattice, unseen but felt by every pore, thrummed once more. And Elsweyr, province of moons and mirrors, walked on in dignified calm, carrying its stories beneath the vast, unending spiral that Lorkai's blood first sketched across the sand. The breath the province drew beneath the twin moons that night endured through a span of quiet decades, and many who walked the sugar roads in those years thought the world had settled for good. They watched caravans shimmer under torch pearls strung along the silver strides, and believed the lattice of bells, tariffs, and pilgrim songs could soften even an empire's hungers. But the moons, patient teachers, seldom leave their pupils, untested for long. Just as a dune seems unmoving until the wind takes one single grain, so too Elsweyr's calm began to shift. First imperceptibly, then with the weight of dawn across a valley floor. It began with coughs in the marshland hamlets. Palatine's planters, who had long traded cane for Colovian wine casks, awoke one rain's hand morning to find a foreman racked by a hacking fit so violent the whites of his eyes bled starbursts of crimson. Within hours, 4 more labourers folded at the waist as though struck by invisible clubs. By dusk, an entire longhouse lay still, its floorboards flecked with the grey-green mucus that legend later named ghost spit. No one yet spoke the word flu. Memories of the Khajiit calamity belonged to older scrolls, but healers felt a chill skitter their whiskers when poultices of night blossom failed to draw out the fever. They burned the beds, scattered river ash across the doorframe, and prayed the swamp's damp breath would smother contagion. Instead, the river carried it downstream. Along the Torval docks, barge captains learned of the deaths at morning muster. They tightened scarf masks, unfurled sails the colour of fresh brews, and made haste for Rimmon, hoping to outrun rumour, and perhaps the thing that birthed it. But rivers regard haste the way dunes regard footprints. They swallow and reshape. A single barrel of cane bricks, unsealed in panic, leaked residue onto deck. Deckhands wiped the syrup with bare paws, licked hunger from their fur, and that evening felt a scratch in the throat like sharp sand. By the time the barge reached the gate of still light, 8 lay delirious. For 3 nights the bell tower tolled the standard cadence. On the 4th, it paused midway through the 2nd note. A silence so startling caravanners toppled cups. When sound resumed, listeners noticed the pitch warbled, as though the brass throat had turned fragile beneath unknown weight. Path readers, along every road, synchronized trip hammers against bell vibrations. Their sifting dishes showed tremors not seen since the Imperial Flotilla fiasco. They relayed a code last used in Ridthar's era. Turn wagon tongues inward, form circle, consult Mane. Yet Mane Jaziri lay miles away in northern Anaquina, listening to a different crisis. Drought-crack fissures opening around the Pathmercy Ring exposing what stonemasons described as veins of black glass that hummed. Thus calamity leapt the province like sparks across dry reed. In the south, a sickness spread mouth to mouth, waterskin to waterskin. In the north, unfamiliar stone rang at midnight, causing censure mounts to buck. Conduits of sugar and sandalwood, so carefully attuned to the moon's breath, now pulsed, with twin maladies. Messengers raced, but the sickness moved faster. By mid-year, Kane estates reported 1 in 5 field hands bedridden, and temple morgues along the coast filled so quickly, lumberers felled teak stands to fashion pyres, leaving whole canals choked with fragrant debris. Imperial tribunals stirred from bureaucratic slumber. Ever since Tiber Septim's successors retreated into ceremony, Cyrodiil's legates relied on provincial governors to maintain stability. Now scrolls bearing the rose-wax seal of Empress Kintyra arrived in Torval, instructing healers to isolate the ill and forward specimens to the arcane university. But already, the second wave rolled. Palatine's humidity sent spores of ghost spit clinging to the hulls of merchant coracles bound for Gideon. From Gideon, it rode packed spice wagons to Leowin. From Leowin, it drifted north through fly-ridden reed beds until Nibonese ferrymen fell where they stood. Scholars would later classify this late Third Era outbreak as a mutation of the ancient Knahaten flu, a last cruel echo, breaking centuries after the first shattering chord. Yet to Khajiit enduring it now, nomenclature mattered less than the empty hammocks swaying at dawn. Mane Jaziri convened the Moon Motif Council in Dune's spiral chamber. Bright moons arrived masked in river coriander leaves soaked with camphor, whispering through cloth that smelled of resinous hope. The mane listened, tail curled tight round ankles, as healers outlined grim arithmetic. At current pace, half of Palatine's harvesters would perish before first seed next year. Sugar reserves could cushion only one season. Famine would follow. Ne Quinal's grain stores might feed Tenmar, but desert scribes balked at exhausting their own silos. Meanwhile, constellations above the council floor shifted, casting crescent shadows that seemed to slice the chamber into shards. The clergy begged the Mene for a sign. He rose, unlatched the socket of his tail bells so that the entire braid fell into his paws. It had never left his tail since coronation. Wordless, he placed it on the polished sandstone at the chamber's heart, its metal loops forming a coil reminiscent of a sleeping censure. "The bells recall us to first principles," he murmured. "We cannot hold shape if we grip too tightly." Then he asked for ink, parchment, and the names of every sugar hall in the province. What followed became legend. Couriers fanned outward, carrying decrees. All sugar halls would close their doors to festivity and convert into fever lodges. Their hearth wok fires, normally tended only at dawn and dusk, now burned day and night, simmering stock brewed from dune lichen and bitter marsh herb. Crowd laughter fell silent. Instead, low chants echoed across vacated streets as volunteers stirred the medicated brew. Patients too weak to move were carried on reed stretchers into halls where their bodies sweated beneath blankets painted with protective script. The brew did not cure, but it steadied breathing and stemmed mucus. It stung the tongue with juniper's sharp edge, jolting many back from delirium. Imperial scribes visiting Torval recorded survival rates rising by a quarter. They praised Khajiit, ingenuity, then quietly requisitioned crates of dune lichen for the university. Ne Quinal, witnessing Palatine's plight, finally opened its grain vaults. Caravans under desert militia escort traced the silver strides south, carts groaning with sacks of cracked millet and sun-dried gar jerky. They cut through choking ash from funeral pyres still smouldering along canal banks, and the air smelled of equal parts spice, grief, and gratitude. In Kane villages, children greeted the desert wagons by beating spoons on empty syrup drums, a thin metallic blessing that rang long after the carts rolled on. Within half a year, the plague curve bent downward. Moon sugar harvest resumed at 1/4. Yield. Not enough for export, but enough to restore the daily bowl-turning blessing. When the bell at still light resumed its unbroken cadence, thousands gathered along reflecting pool in hush. No one cheered. They simply listened, eyes closed, as though reacquainting themselves with a fond heartbeat. And yet calamity seldom travels alone. Even as ghost spit receded into memory, the black glass fissures by the Path Mercy ring widened, and nomad scouts began reporting sounds in the high dunes, echoes like hammers on anvils deep underground. At first, scholars blamed tectonic restlessness, but when a Senche-Rat riding patrol vanished, leaving only scorched hoof prints in perfect semicircle, unease stiffened spines. Across Tamriel, the winds of prophecy shifted. Emperors died without heirs. Petty wars bloomed like mold. When the simulacrum of Jagar Tharn shattered imperial authority, many provinces withdrew behind old borders. Elsweyr sensed opportunity, yet also peril, for chaos invites certain princes. And if Daedra can wink into sunlit plazas of the white gold itself, then what of quiet desert rings that already hum? Thus it was that on the 20th day of last seed in the year now chronicled as 3E389, the moons overhead showed not their familiar mirrored discs, but emptiness. Sky where Joan and Jode should have drifted lay bare. At first, watchers assumed clouds, though no clouds moved. Then path readers compared astrolabe readings from desert meridian towers to marshland watermarkers and found the same horror. The celestial lanterns had vanished. Their absence persisted 5 nights, 10, 20. The Khajiit clergy called this the first void night. They stated plainly what every heart already feared. The moons, those patient parents, had stepped outside the world's frame, and without their light, the sugar crystal's hidden angles could not form. Entire cane fields soured, caravan bell rhythms faltered, panic threatened where plague had not. Some Alphic librarians packed scrolls in cedar cases and fled toward Valenwood. Others curled atop stacks of vellum, refusing to move lest the words vanish next. Skooma dens overflowed, patrons seeking quick fire against abyss. Imperial garrisons locked their gates. Overworked healers begged for guidance. In this murk rose voices claiming the moons died because Khajiit turned from virtue. Some pointed to skooma dens, others to trade treaties with man-emperors. Jaziri, Mane no more yet not less revered, came down from the high valley to stand beneath the still light bell once again. He called for silence that night, but the silence was there already. Even insects hushed without lunar cue. The Main placed one paw in the reflection pool. Water shivered though no breeze stirred. "The moons are not gone," he said, voice steady as desert basalt. "They walk behind a curtain. We must keep the lantern lit on this side." That phrase, "keep the lantern lit," spread through village, caravan, dune outpost. Priests rewrote it on sugar hall doors so fever patients now read new comfort. Musicians retuned desert drums a half-step deeper to compensate for missing moon resonance. Cane workers hung polished silver discs among stalks to catch Magnus's rays, invoking second-hand lunar glow. None of this replaced the moons, but it gave the hours shape. The void nights lasted nearly 2 whole years. During them, subtle changes rippled across Khajiiti culture. Census clerks, unable to anchor fur stock designations to lunar phase, adopted a fluid registry, each citizen's self-declared form upon each tax season. Some used this loophole to claim both merchant and clergy exemptions. Officials shrugged, lacking cosmic anchor. More profoundly, Khajiit confronted an inner test. Could their identity survive without external mirror? Many concluded yes. Some concluded no. A small sect, calling themselves the Hollow Whisker, shaved their whiskers in mourning and vowed silence until the first sliver of Joan returned. They kept vow almost to the day, when in Hearthfire of the 2nd year, a pale edge new cut into sky. 3 nights later, Jode followed. Bells rang across entire crescent, though some cracked from disuse. At Gate of Still Light, water again reflected twin discs. The main's tail bells quivered like leaves, at last thaw. Imperial astrologers claimed credit. Soothsayers in service to the new emperor recalibrated dragonfires, they said. Khajiit marked the story with polite ear flick. They knew cosmic debts, seldom paid so cheaply. Rumours trickled that Aldmeri Sijiks performed hidden rites. Others whispered of Thalmor agents pledging aid only Elsweyr would receive. The truth, layered deep as dunes, is contested still. What mattered then? Moons returned, sugar crystals resumed unaffected geometry, and caravans found their rhythms. Again. Yet memory of the sky's emptiness lingered under every conversation, as though Joan and Jode now shone through faint veil only Khajiiti eyes perceived. Barely had the lattice regained strength when the next convulsion tore across Tamriel. The Oblivion Crisis. Portents arrived first in dreams. Dream scribes at desert observatories reported sudden spikes of starlight intensity, spiral lines twisting into jagged spears. Record scribes cross-checked Mehrunes Dagon's steed, and the shimmer constellation of the broken limbs pulsed simultaneously. Unheard of. Shortly after, outer watchtowers along the Valenwood border lit red beacons. Small portals, flickering like embers, opened among thorn trees. Daedric hounds slipped out, eyes smouldering as if feeding on long-stored rage. Scout teams dispatched. From Naquin Al found tracks burned 6 inches into packed earth, each pawprint fused into glass. When the crisis reached full fury, Elsweyr braced under lessons learned from Plague and Void Knights. Caravan companies rearmed with moonglass arrowheads etched in Dawn's Wrath sigils. Marsh flutists rescored their Jode hymns in tritone scales, placing sonic barriers along canal routes. Yet gates to oblivion do not respect roadblocks. Onnai, a black sky noon outside Dune, a rift tore open above the Path Mercy Ring, casting crimson light across pink granite pillars. Some claimed they heard the ring itself purr, as if alive, before one pillar cracked and toppled. From the rift spilled scamps whose shrieks reverberated off stone. But here, desert unity shone. Cathay Rat companies flanked by Imperial auxiliaries formed tri-line wedge and advanced with synchronized half-beat step. Alphic mages behind them volleyed shards of enchanted sugar crystal that detonated in clouds of sticky fire. The scamps coated, slowed. Senche mounts crashed through like living battering rams, crushing lesser Daedra under iron-shod paws. Battle lasted till dusk, when a bright moon priest recited litany to Alkosh. Time stuttered, giving a moonglass spear the impossible moment to find the rift's heart. It sealed with thunderclap, louder than all drums of the walkabout combined. Not. Every fight ended in triumph. In Palatine, an Oblivion gate opened atop trade quay of Palatine. Flame Atronach set Kane warehouses ablaze before defences rallied. The firestorm soared bright enough for sailors a day's sail out on Topol to mistake it for sunrise. When the gate at last fell, half the wharf district lay ashen, sugar flows disrupted as they had been during plague. Palatine's lords, rebuilt with canals of stone lined in fused volcanic glass, a material Dagon's heat could not char. They named the new docks Dawn Mirrored Steps, bridging memory of ruin and resolve to trade again. Throughout crisis, Mane Jaziri coordinated province-wide defense by sound rather than sight. Knowing that Daedric storms could darken sky or blind scouts, he repurposed copper wires of silver strides into resonance grid. Bell notes vibrated along sand. Path readers trained to detect tremor variants of half heartbeat. When a rift warped air, wires changed pitch minutely, and relay drums signaled where to send reinforcements. Imperial tacticians later studied the grid, admitting grudging respect. Some speculated the Empire could adapt such system for Cyrodiil. Others feared giving provinces too much autonomous strength. When Martin Septim ignited the Chimel Adabal and the amulet shattered, the war ended, across continents in a breath. In Elsweyr, the wires stilled. Bells tolled steady quarter. Wounds began to knit. Yet hearts, already bruised by plague and void, remained tender. Khajiit looked back on 30 years and saw disease, absent moons, Daedric invasion. They wondered, what fragile curtain kept next calamity at bay? Into that uncertainty stepped envoys from Somerset, elegantly robed Altmer calling themselves Thalmor. They arrived first at Senchal, disembarking from golden-prowed catamarans embossed with infinity knots. Their message: the Empire lay fractured. Only the Dominion could guarantee stability, and the Dominion had not forgotten who suffered when moons vanished. They claimed credit for coaxing Joan and Jode back into the sky. Proof? Their banners bore stylized overlapping crescents. Hushed sugar hall corners speculated, perhaps they spoke truth, perhaps manipulation. Yet gratitude even, unsure, finds foothold in uncertainty. The Thalmor approach was two-edged. To Nequinal, they promised respect for desert autonomy. Shipments of healing salve refined from Somerset coral. A cure, they hinted, for lingering breathlessness among ghost spit survivors. To Pa'alatin, they offered favorable tariffs on glass gemstone trade, plus arcane wards to protect new wharfs from Daedric flame. In both cities, they hosted moonlit banquets, serving wines chilled by ice conjured from air Atronax. Imperial ambassadors struggling to rebuild post-crisis infrastructure could not match the spectacle. Moreover, resentment simmered toward the Empire, whose Dragon Guard legions had withdrawn early to defend Cyrodiil, leaving Khajiit to close some gates unaided. The desert remembered. Still, the Main approached with caution. He requested concrete demonstration of Dominion's lunar stewardship. Thalmor Archmagister Selenaril obliged. In a public ritual atop the Mirror Hall roof, she unfurled scrolls of pale vellum and recited a spell that traced a faint silver arc across daytime sky, an illusion of Joan faintly visible even at noon. Crowd gasped. Selenaril bowed, declared, "Moons need never vanish again under Dominion watch." Some scholars argued the display mere glamour. Others whispered of profound etherical prowess. The doubt mattered little. Hope blossomed. Within 6 years of crisis, Elsweyr signed the Concordat of Bright Contracts. It split province back into two client states, Anaquina and Palatine, nominally still under main spiritual authority, but politically tied to Aldmeri Dominion frameworks. The decision stung older caravanners who recalled the Compact of Two Moons. Yet younger merchants welcomed new ports in Valenwood and river routes guarded by Dominion frigates. Sugar exports soared to Somerset markets, hungry for exotic sweet. Moonglass lanterns lined arboreal walkways in Eldon Route. Imperial scribes lamented loss of a jewel, but the Empire, reeling from oblivion scars and potentate shortages, could not muster a quarrel. They dispatched negotiators urging at least open border trade. Dominion allowed it, for fees denominated in arcane silver marks minted on Somerset. Economics bent reality. Many desert caravans now carried Dominion coin along with Imperial drakes, and value fluctuated nightly based on whichever moon cast broader shadow across Gate of Still Light Pool. Even bells responded. New resonance wires, spun from Aldmeri silver glass alloy, carried clearer tone, but at cost of brittle fragility. A sandstorm severed one, leaving southern routes deaf until artisans, Thalmor trained, repaired them. Cultural exchange followed coin. Sky sails, magical cloth that stiffened under starlight, arrived from Alinor, enabling dune skimmer craft that glided over sand like boats over water. Khajiit smiths infused sails with powdered sugar crystal, making them shimmer turquoise. Dominion mages established colleges at Torval, teaching numerology of dawn stars. Khajiit reciprocated by exporting desert percussion styles to Altma concert halls. Despite cooperation, some tension simmered, a sense among older bright moons that the Dominion's promises mirrored cunning reflection more than true moonlight. That tension found voice in the Alabaster Rebuttal, a thesis penned by scholar-poet Bayinar Mahi-Kin. He traced Dominion claims of lunar restoration to partial truths and concluded, "The moons returned because they never left. It was we who stood outside their light." The scroll circulated sugar halls in secret. Thalmor, censors confiscated copies, citing seditious doctrine. But ideas travel like perfume. Once spilled, cannot be rebottled. Even so, most Khajiit weighed philosophical unease against tangible gains. Reopened trade, new sky sails, towers warded against Daedra. Then, in year 4E98, sky darkened once more, only over Elsweyr. For 2 full years, Joan and Jode vanished, repeating the void, but this time sparing other provinces. Thalmor envoys declared Dominion already at work, restoring rightful order. They convened councils, performed grand rituals on river barges, and after 2 years the moons reappeared, as prophesied by themselves. Khajiit, wearied, accepted explanation. Aldmeri banners fluttered high. The Dominion reaffirmed spiritual authority. Many hailed the Thalmor as lunar saviors. Others, remembering Bayinar, wondered who dims lanterns to prove brightness when lit again. Yet politics ebb beneath customs harder to shift. Caravans still gathered at sugar halls each dawn, turning bowls, whispering, "Joan guides, Jode guards." Desert drums still broke silence of 10-mast starlight with triplet cadence. Cane flute melodies still wound through mangrove byways. Children still carved names beneath dune cypress roots. And somewhere a dream scribe, powdered with careful dose of crystal, still lay on obsidian slab, charting star roads that curved into spirals only Khajiit perceive. In the quiet between crises, artisans restored Path Mercy ring pillar, fusing. Cracks with molten pink granite and inset shards of black glass discovered deep below. They learned the glass carried faint vibratory hum, identical to sugar crystals dissolved in boiling syrup. Proof, they said, that world above and beneath sing same note under moons. Scholars argued geological chants. Priests smiled beneath their masks and left debate for younger minds. The Concordat held, if uneasily, until Great War flared between Empire and Dominion outside province bounds. Legion recruiters returned to Riverhold, now wearing crests of Mede dynasty. They sought Khajiiti auxiliaries. Many Cathay Rat signed for coin. Others, bitter over earlier abandonments, declined. Maneak Khan, successor to Jaziri, negotiated neutrality, citing sugar roads essential to both warring sides. His bells rang neutral cadence, yet skirmishes erupted on border passes. History once more reminds, moons guide, but claws decide. Then, elder caravanners told Kits, the world had changed thrice in one lifetime. Plague's hush, void's darkness, Daedra's fire. They taught that calm is not lull but discipline. The daily act of turning bowl, brewing juniper jam, walking sugar path even when sky's lantern vanishes. They taught that Elsweyr remains Elsweyr because it moves. Step, tail flick, bell chime, new dune after wind. And if empires claim guardian rights over moons, let them try holding starlight in fists. Khajiit no pause best grip by letting sand slip, reading its fall to tell next wind's tale. Toward the close of 4th Era's 2nd century, the bell, tower at gate of still light still stands, brass mouth weather dark but resonant, wires now woven of mixed Dominion silver glass and Imperial white steel in uneasy duet. On nights when Joan waxes, water in the reflection pool catches desert starlight and cane fire glow alike, melding into sheen older than any treaty. Pilgrims still arrive barefoot, repeating walkabout spiral. Sugar masters still stir woks, adjusting pitch to whichever dialect singers choose that dawn. And above, Joan and Jode still circle each other, patient, indifferent to banners, yet intimately attuned to every claw that traces spiral in sand. So Elsweyr endures calamity and renewal, desert and river, empire and dominion, holding its stories not as fortress keeps stone, but as dune holds shape, ever changing, yet ever there, beneath the eternal dance of the twin moons whose silver pulls at blood, at sugar, at song, and at the silent memory of Khajiit's first question breathed into newborn sand. Magnus had already dipped half his blazing disc behind, the jagged silhouette of the Rimwalds, when a hush settled over the caravan's staging grounds north of Riverhold. It was the hush of songs unfinished and contracts poised for signature, but not yet sealed by wax. An expectant pause, older than any treaty, repeated each time Elsweyr stood at the hinge of another turn in the spiral. One by one, the desert watchfires flared, and with their steady orange glow came the night's first reflexive glance skyward. There, the moons drifted, Joan a slim curve, Jode waxing broad, as familiar as breath, yet laden with an unease that had festered since the second void. Night ended. Everyone saw them. No one trusted them completely. This wariness formed the quiet pulse beneath the final decades of the Fourth Era, as Khajiiti hearts strained to hear what stories might still lie hidden in the silver beyond. Along the embankment stood merchants from Anaquina's salt flats, their wagons piled high with polished dune pearls stacked like translucent beets. Across from them huddled Palatine sailors, newly come up river, with crates of lattice sugar marinated in dew water, so cold it still beaded on cedar planks. Both groups spoke the same bargaining tongue, yet each carried separate ledgers. Anaquina's, columns measured against desert moonrise hours, Palatine's against the river tides summoned by Jode. They met on common parchment only because the Main's charter demanded it. And even the Main's charter, once etched in brass beneath gate of still-light archway, now bore fresh scuffs where a Dominion herald had scraped the wording to insert a new clause. Shipments bound for Somerset capitals must travel under Thalmor, seal or pay a double levy. Trade continued, but the hush lingered, every clause another stone balancing on brittle peace. 2 rows of Legion tents flanked the exchange grounds. Their banners flew neither the ruby dragon of Mead nor the golden eagle of Dominion, but a plain crescent split by vertical line, symbol of neutrality hammered out at the end of the Great War, when both superpowers agreed to treat the Sugar Road as glass, fragile enough that one thrown pebble could cut both feet at once. Imperial auxiliaries in battered iron helms patrolled beneath that banner beside Altmerry justiciars clad in mirror-bright scale. They swapped curt nods, then looked away, each convinced the other watched with ulterior purpose. Yet they shared the same watch list. Skooma traffickers, anti-Dominion insurgents out of Valenwood, and roving Razorvine marauders who had begun to test border posts after rumours spread that legionaries and justiciars dared not step beyond a mile of their joint, markers without summoning a bilateral tribunal. At the rim of the hush stood a single reed platform draped in sand-coloured cloth. On it perched 3 Alphic archivists, fur combed into perfect chevrons. One held a polished obsidian ticker disc that hummed faintly, tuned to the resonance wire snaking east toward the gate of still light. Every few breaths the disc fluttered, registering some distant note, perhaps a pilgrim bell rung in Torval, perhaps vibration from a sky sail skimming dunes days away. The Alphic scribbled shorthand on a palm-sized slate. 3rd sextile, amplitude minor, then flicked his tail in coded semaphore. This ballet of tails signaled the second archivist to press a tuning fork to the boardwalk floor. Its chime confirmed that for now the road's pulse remained regular. The third archivist noted time and moon positions on folded parchment. Such vigilance had grown commonplace after the crisis. An invisible second lattice of measurement overlaid upon the old spiral of sugar and trade. The archivist's consensus, road calm, carried down the line by flicked whiskers, and tension eased. Merchants raised voices again, calling out measures of crystal weight. Imperial quartermasters extracted sets of brass counterweights to verify. Altmerry trade adjudicators read aloud the new clause regarding Somerset levy. The hush gave, way to arguments smoothed by well-worn courtesy, and the world resumed its motion. Yet beneath every syllable, listeners detected the new baseline truth of the age. The Empire no longer monopolized order. The Dominion no longer wore solely cloaks of beneficence, and Elsweyr's own Belgrid served as last impartial border between looming giants. Far to the south, in the mangrove labyrinth near Helkarn, a different transaction unfolded. A reed raft approached a torchlit jetty without any lantern code, and that alone would have summoned suspicion had not the watcher atop the piling recognized its prow emblem. A stylized sugarcane broken at midpoint. That symbol belonged to the Hollow Whisker, those who had sworn silence during the Void Nights and never fully returned to speech. The watcher, a lean Toje rat known as Shell Call, lowered a rope ladder. Two figures padded up, both Alphic, muzzles wrapped in linen. Behind them, a third silhouette, taller, cloaked, tail-tipped in pewter bell. No single clan claimed silver bell since Mane Akhan's time. Such an ornament signified envoy status. Shellcall keyed a small bell of his own, the note sinking into river hush. A door in the jetty floor opened. The trio vanished below. What the Hollow Whisker traded tonight was not skooma, nor forbidden spell, but information bound in successive rings of secrecy. Confirmation that the Thalmor Council in Firsthold had approved plans for a high-altitude skysail network connecting Somerset to Elsweyr's Cloudspine peaks. On parchment, the proposal seemed benign. Faster courier routes, medical supply drops. But its footnotes revealed design specifications. Silver glass cables strung through desert stratosphere, anchored to lattice towers wrapped around Select. Granite pillars, Pathmercy among them. Once rigged, those towers would resonate with attunement crystals keyed to Altmerry scry globes, effectively grafting the Dominion's etheric observation network onto Khajiit sacred pillars. For priests who remembered the hum of black glass below the ring and blamed it for part of the Oblivion fissures, such installations sounded like a claw scratched across still water. Subtle, yet ruinous. The Hollow Whisker couriers did not utter these concerns. Silence remained their creed. Instead, they produced small canisters containing fields of scribbled glyph micro-etched on moonglass shards. Shell Call accepted them and passed on sealed leather pouches lined with juniper bloom. This scent masked the parcels from Justiciar, sniffers. He then signaled with tail flick to the shadows. An old Palmar sat there, half hidden, wearing single brass earring. The Palmar lifted one paw in silent blessing before the couriers descended back into raft. Within an hour they slipped into darkness, guided by sky channels known only to mute whisk. Information would travel north next, toward, or perhaps past, the main seat in Rimmen Cathedral ruins. It would cross neutral zone wires encoded by rhythm rather than voice, safer than clandestine letter. And so Elsweyr's system of unofficial guardianship continued, born of habit when trust in outside powers could not fill the void left by the moon's earlier betrayal. Across desert clay pans in northeast, heat shimmered above the bones of once grand Fortress Canarthi's grace. The ruin sheltered an itinerant band of Imperial veterans turned freelance caravan guards, led by triple-scarred Captain Matthias Volso. Volso had fought in the Great War, lost half his cohort in a nameless gully west of Coral, taken discharge, and imported his gloom to Elsweyr. He now sold protection to whichever caravan offered best rate. Dominion Sugar Train 1 month, Independent Rimvold Grain Team next. Neutrality suited him because coin smelled the same no matter which mint stamped it. Yet on this scorching afternoon, neutrality met a test. A courier wearing Dominion Sky Sail tabard arrived with sealed order instructing Volso's company to redeploy east and discourage border nomads rumored to smuggle sugar crystal to rebel forces in Valenwood. Volso read the scroll, spat dust, and asked what bounty the rebels offered for smuggling sugar into forests. The courier shrugged. Volso weighed risk. Obey Thalmor, risk alienating desert clients. Refuse, risk suspicion of aiding rebels. He rolled the scroll into a cylinder, shoved it into campfire where it flared blue, and told his men they'd be guarding a neutral caravan bound for Riften instead. Another silent rebellion, small but cumulative. Khajiit had rubbed off on him. Choices flowed like dunes, not stone. His refusal would reach Dominion ears, but not before the caravan he escorted passed the 10-mile watchposts manned by silver-stride rangers whose loyalty bent only to the bell wires. More ripples in calm. Few ripple creators saw themselves building currents. Yet when currents meet, they can carve new riverbeds.